moments for that to happen. Okay, the meeting's now being recorded. I'd like to welcome everyone to the meeting this morning. You want me to do that? Right, okay, first. Right, we'll do the sederunt first. And any apologies?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So I have an apology from Councillor Lorraine Jones. Councillor Neil Watts?
Yes.
Yep, thank you. Councillor David Richardson?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Canning?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Maben?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Councillor Beverly Clark?
Yeah, here.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Sally Cogley? Councillor Cogley? Okay. Councillor William Lennox?
Morning, present.
Thank you. Councillor June Kyle?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Jennifer Hogg? Councillor Hogg? Okay. And Councillor Elaine Stewart?
Present.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, right, I'll go back and welcome everyone to the meeting this morning. I'm chairing the meeting this morning in the absence of Councillor Jones. I'd like to welcome Rose Gillian, who has just joined the audit team on Tuesday. Welcome to the committee and welcome to the meeting. Right, okay, right. So have we got any declarations of interest? Okay, minutes of the last meeting. Pages 3 to 6. And I have approval of the correct minutes of the last meeting.
I'll do that.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
William. Okay, do we have any matters arising from the minutes? No, okay, right. So we shall move on to next item, which is the school inspection updates, which will be given by Graham McGinn.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, colleagues and members. The purpose of the report this morning on school inspection updates is to provide the Governance and Scrutiny Committee with progress updates for inspections that took place prior to the COVID pandemic and during school session 2021-22. There's two parts to the report. In the first part, the previous chair of Governance and Scrutiny Committee had requested progress updates for inspections that had taken place prior to the COVID pandemic. And that's included in the first section of the report. It provides a summary of progress for those inspections. School inspection activity ceased in March 2020, with limited inspection activity resuming in November 2021. And the second section of the report details the outcome of the inspection activity that took place from November 2021. And that's the HMIE engagements with Drongan Primary School and Early Childhood Centre, Partner Primary School and Early Childhood Centre, and Dalrymple Primary School and Early Childhood Centre. HMIE identified progress in each of these schools that are detailed for Drongan in paragraph 28, for Partner in paragraph 35, and Dalrymple in paragraph 42. What was particularly pleasing from the feedback from HMIE was some of the key messages that were coming through those inspection reports. And that included that school leadership teams in each of the schools are leading their teams well, leading to impact and raising attainment. And the leadership teams are also, and staff are also raising attainment and aspirations of children. So some really strong key messages coming through from those inspection reports. Also, what's strong and really reassuring is that HMIE have concluded all outstanding inspection activity in relation to Drongan, Partner and Dalrymple, and there will be no further visits to these schools. At the time of writing, inspections were due to resume in school session 2022-23. They have now resumed, and updates will be provided to Governance and Scrutiny Committee as and when Education Scotland provide reports on each of these inspection activities. So the recommendations are detailed in paragraph 2, and I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you, Graham. Are there any questions for Graham? No? Okay. Are we happy to?
Neil,
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Stewart.
Elaine, Councillor Stewart, yeah.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Firstly, I'd really like to congratulate all the schools with their HMIE, especially the schools that are on my ward. So I'm really pleased to see that. Whilst reading it and reading the success stories, on page 9, paragraph 22, we're talking about closing the attainment gap, and we're looking at numeracy and literacy within other schools. Have we got any concerns with any of our other schools in this respect?
Councillor Stewart, we constantly work with our schools to review the progress in literacy and attainment and health and wellbeing. And at this time, we're delighted with the progress that schools are making, particularly in relation to some of the recently released senior phase results, where we are performing very well nationally, certainly in comparison to other local authorities. So at this stage, early indications, given that we've only just had an update in terms of exam results, we are delighted with the progress that has been made with our schools at this time.
Excellent, thank you.
Have we got any further questions for Graham? No, okay. So if we go back to page 7, is the committee happy to agree the recommendations at number 2? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we shall now move on to out with placements, and I shall go to Charles Rocks.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is Charles Rocks. I'm Senior Manager for Children and Families, Localities and Health and Social Care Partnership, and I'm here to present to the Governance and Scrutiny Committee the audit report on out with placements. In this report, I'm presenting on behalf of the Director of the East Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership. The report today really provides a background of all the numbers of residential care placements out with East Ayrshire, both with a residential and education component, in addition to out with day education need that is required to be provisioned by both social work and education services. It also highlights and profiles the resource investment within preventative supports, both within education and social work, in regards to individual children's plans, with the purpose of enhancing support around children through full-time teachers, classroom assistant supports to meet the needs of children within East Ayrshire and limit the requirement for children to move out with area to seek the education. For an update, members, the Out With Placement Screening Group, which is the OPSG, has been established now for over 11 years, and it acts as a sort of screening scrutiny group to consider all the recommendations from the professionals involved in the children's lives, both social workers and educational psychologists. It's a multi-agency group with the emphasis and philosophy to reflect the Council's commitment to being a community parent to children, and to establish best value for children and best value for the Council and the IGIB at the same time. The report will give an overview of all placements in 2021-22. It will highlight that there's been a small movement in the number of residential placements from 19 as of the 31st of March last year to 17 in a residential care as of 31st of March this year. Although the movement between the last number of years has been minimal, it still highlights a reduction in comparison to 6 years ago, where at that stage we had 24, 25 children being cared for out with East Ayrshire. There's been a huge unpredictability on COVID recovery. The social and economic impact that it's having in our communities is placing significant pressure on existing resources within our kinship, foster care and children's houses. And this is placing an extraordinary demand on care capacity. And this is not just localised for East Ayrshire. This is a challenge that is experienced Ayrshire-wide and nationally. The Table 1 gives a breakdown of the report in terms of the placement trends over the last 5 years in regards to where the resource and investment has been placed. And you will note within that there are a couple of changes within that in terms of increase in capacity in comparison to the stability of residential care requirements. What we need to emphasise is that children who do require to be placed within an external children's house or residential school have experienced significant bereavement, loss, trauma and neglect within their life, and with a huge level of complex needs. These children require multi-agency interventions intensely, and what we experience is that they have exacerbated feelings of loss and rejection as a means of having to be cared for out with their own community. We often experience that these out with placements offer a level of specialism and support, often through therapeutic interventions, which is reflective of the significant costs and investments that are placed within the resource. You'll note within the report that there's been a range of education-led approaches taken to really provide really effective and preventative support for young people. Very much like the experiences within social work as a targeted intervention support. Our colleagues in Universal Services have done a huge amount of work to really support complex need at a child's plan stage. And there's been some really creative use of classroom support and preventative support to support that. We have seen an increase in the requirement to access day education support out with East Ayrshire. And that is profiled within Table 2, and currently we've seen an increase this year so far in the provision of that resource. Ordinarily, these resources are within Spark of Genius, within Kibble Education, are in Mirren Park up in Paisley, and there's a level of oversight and scrutiny that the OPSG provides to try and ensure that there are plans for our children, both education and in care, to come back to East Ayrshire. There's a section in the report that does look at our future challenges and opportunities, quite extensive there in regards to some of the complexity and the impact that both COVID, but also the current cost of living crisis and unpredictability with that for our communities is placing huge significant pressures. Just to kind of highlight some of the kind of opportunities and some of the work that the Children and Young People Strategic Partnership is taking forward, particularly around partnership with Scottish Government around Tranche 1 and Tranche 2, which is additional investment support around holistic family support. There has been enhancement throughout that, particularly around the implementation of HEART with our community model of virtual multidisciplinary teams. And really proud to kind of announce that we were one of 3 areas nationally to be identified for the additional test pilot funding for family support around Tranche 2. And we'll be working with colleagues in Scottish Government over the next year, 18 months, to begin to think about an implementation and enhanced implementation of HEART, but to look at how we offer early and effective intervention at a true point in a child's life. And this is hoped that this will create a real transformation, a sort of second, third horizon planning around meeting that level of complex need at an earlier stage, that fundamentally looking forward, and we will hope to see increased reduction in the requirement for the significant costs within OPSG. The report highlights the Scotland Excel and framework providers and the complexities of the negotiation that's required to take place at local authority level with the framework, and it does provide some information about the review of that, which was done in conjunction with independent care review to build in a new service criteria. And that framework is expected to come into effect at the end of this month. Just to highlight in terms of financial implications, which is profiled within the report, what it does highlight is that we have got an average cost of residential care placements, which is currently identified as at £239,440, which is a significant investment. Within that, the budget itself was overspent in terms of gross cost in 2021-22 by 482,000. However, it's noted where this was an overspend, it was recovered in regards to wholesale COVID cost claims of 844,000, which noted there was an underspend overall to OPSG of 416,406. It noted within the secure budget was also underspent, but again, where we had one young person having to be cared for and supported within a secure care provision, we were able to recover that via COVID cost claims, which brought an underspend of 345,000 for 2021-22. Where that's positive, what we do need to recognise is that were able to access COVID recovery resourcing within that, and we do recognise there is a huge amount of further work we need to do to provide that level of scrutiny oversight to try and make sure that the OPSG comes in within a saving. The risk implications noted within the report, and there is a profile of the community planning implications, particularly the multi-agency overlaps within the report. And Chair, I'll just kind of point to the recommendations within the report as well for committee today. And I'm happy to take any points and questions from committee members. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Have we got any questions for Charles? Councillor Richardson.
Charles, it's just page 19.35, just where it says, as a consequence of experience, Children, Families, Locality Services in East Ayrshire has experienced a significant shrinkage in staffing capacity, with a high number of experienced social workers leaving the profession and or the service due to professional fatigue. And it then goes on to say that, we're fluctuating between 50 to 60% capacity, and, we're requiring to implement a prioritisation framework to ensure that we're meeting the statutory requirements. That paragraph was a wee bit concerning, to be honest. Have we got any update at this point from MD? Does MD in the room know how recruitment's going with regards that point?
Yeah, there's some of these trends and themes began to establish, Councillor Richardson, earlier this year, and there was a huge amount of work done around both our recruitment and retention strategy to begin to kind of understand perhaps the reason why we were losing experienced social work staff. The reality for this is that we have a group of professionals who, at the first point of the national lockdown in 2020, and the real level of uncertainty we all had within our communities and within our national public services. We're really on the front line of continuing to support families without even, the establishment of PPE or other risk mitigations, get into family homes and dealing with a high level of community distress and anxiety. At a point where there wasn't necessarily the additionality of supports around other children's services other than early years health visiting, because our schools were offering the kind of bespoke hub support for our most vulnerable children. The community supports were really limited, and that has probably been the experiences of social workers for the majority of an 18-month, 2-year period. What we had is a group of professionals who were really fatigued and distressed, some who were walking away from the profession. And just to reassure members today, this is not just necessarily localised for East Ayrshire. This has been a challenge for the profession through Scotland and has been raised through Social Work Scotland, where there has been a strategy put in place through Scottish Government to begin to look at some of the routes and pathways. The recruitment and retention group has been pretty relentless in regards to trying to come up with and enhance the support for staff, particularly around wellbeing. The recruitment has been incredible. We have done a number of different recruitment strategies to enhance that, and I think we have increased staff quite considerably since that was noted, and we are roughly around at this time around about a 70% resource capacity, and we'll continue to recruit as much as we can. What I need to add to that is just some caution is that ordinarily we are only able to attract newly qualified social workers who are just out of university, and we are really committed to their professional support and development, particularly around complex work and protection work in terms of the development needs that they may have. And we're doing some work around workforce planning to begin to look at the nature of our wisdom and experience within our staff group to ensure we've got the right level of capacity and resilience to meet the need coming forward. So hopefully that provides some reassurance that there is a lot of work going on, and the support from the partnership in IGB has been really positive. Thanks.
Councillor Cogley.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Charles. Thank you very much for your report. And I think we all realise the very, very tricky nature of the work that you're dealing with here, and the nature of the issues that you're addressing. I've got two areas that I'd just like to ask questions on, please. First of all, which you have already touched on, but I'm not clear in my mind, the overlap between education and social work. I'm not sure where that divide line sort of sits, and do we have, it's not a nice word to use, but sort of a demarcation as to what education does and what social work does, and in terms of staff in those particular areas. So that's my first question. And the second, I'm looking at the table on paragraph 11, table 1, placement trends. And it's over the years ending 18, 19, 20, 21 and 22. And I'm just trying to get a picture in my mind as to how many young people we have who we're providing this service for. And I'm just a little bit unclear on that. And is that those who are properly recognised by schools? And do we think that there are potentially more young people out there, but we don't have the resources to actually address all of their needs? So that's two different questions. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Councillor Cogley. So I probably need to go back in a bit of a kind of history background around the creation of Outwith, the Outwith Placement Screening Group and the arrangements that sat under the Department of Education, which also included social services and social work at that time. So it's part of the one service, and as part of the establishment of the IGB and the Health and Social Care Partnership, the arrangements for the out with placements continued around how the resource and financial investments came together. So it was agreed that the Health and Social Care Partnership through the IGIB would hold the responsibilities for OPSG, but given there are a recognition about the overlaps of out with day placements and the preventative support, that there was a continuation of the partnership work that both Child and Family Social Work and education from an ASN component would continue to work on with the support of educational psychology. And the reason is that some of these children's plans do overlap in regards to that team around the child component, where the need might be for de-education or preventative support, but ordinarily there would still be a social work involvement within that. But the lead for that plan, or that component of the plan, would sit within education with the support of social work lead professional. There are children within OPSG who do not require social work support or intervention, and the education colleagues, as the named person service, through the oversight of educational psychology, would bring the plans within the OPSG, and the oversight and scrutiny would still sit within there. I suppose it's a good point, Councillor Cogley, is in terms of that it's unique that there is an educational resource that's been provided, that the oversight and responsibilities lies with the Health and Social Care Partnership. And that's just part of historical arrangement and the historical terms of reference and how the OPSG would function. And I suppose what we are mindful of is that how we, in years to come, begin to review that. What would assure you is it still does provide a good multi-agency oversight about our most vulnerable children. The other point in regards to Table 2 is that Table 2 does highlight a particular position in time when we are auditing the numbers within OPSG. That's numbers as at that date that the children we would have within that resource. There are times where children might access preventative support short term, or they may require an out with educational care establishment, residential placement, but that might only be for a very short period, because we've been able to return them back either to an East Ayrshire council care provision, or we've been able to achieve some form of reunification with family. To kind of reassure you, there would be no other children that we would have in any other establishment that we would not have some level of audit oversight in regards to their plan. There is additional vulnerability out there, absolutely, and I think there is a requirement in terms of trying to be as creative as we can within the existing resources, both within education from an ASN component, and the huge amount of work in terms of establishing some of the additional learning community hubs within secondary provisions, but a huge amount of work our colleagues in education have been doing around that, in addition to the enhancement of some of that family support model that can try and support family units together within their own communities. Hopefully that's answered your point, Councillor Cogley.
Yeah, thank you. And
Councillor Cogley, you're breaking up.
hello, can you hear me properly now? Can you hear me now? Yep.
Yes.
Just in terms of implementing the programme that we call the Promise, is there an overlap of what we do by virtue of that particular programme and the work that we're carrying out here? Perhaps you could just answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's, Councillor Cogley, there is a multi-agency strategy around the Promise that we have got an implementation lead within the Health and Social Care Partnership, working with other partners. Part of that will is closely aligned to the developments around HEART, which is looking at that in philosophy and approach to really beginning to think about, from a strategic point of view, how our services can align to begin to disinvest to reinvest within family support, and look to try and address family support in a different way. one of the key components in the recommendations of the promise is tasking us to think about restorative community-led family group decision making, you know, to begin to enhance our communities and families to begin to think about within their own resources and their own experiences how that can be supported, in addition to having that targeted bespoke support at the right time. And I'd mentioned earlier on that we have done a huge amount of work within that, particularly around, you know, the additional COVID-related family support resourcing that Scottish Government has provided, but also how we're going to design the investment around Tranche 1 resource, but also we were one of the 3 areas around Tranche 2. And that's trying to change the philosophy and the approach we've got, that fundamentally that children need to remain within their own communities, and we should only have children requiring this element or area of support when we've exhausted all opportunities, but we capture it at the right time in the legacy of children's childhoods, which is giving them the best opportunity to achieve parency and stability, and limit the requirement for residential care, which is ordinarily around the age range of children who are 12 years and above. And that's what our hopes and intentions will be. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, and if I could just come back on that one very briefly, because as far as the HEART initiative is concerned, then as an elected member in Ward 6, I'd very much like to be aware of the initiatives and be involved, if possible, as to what we're actually doing. Would I be able to? Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Cogley. And you know, one of the key areas we're looking to do is connect as close as we can to communities. We have strategic groups that are set up with each community area with a whole range of the multi-agency professionals and community connections in place. What I will take forward, if there's an interest from elected members, is to revisit this within the strategic group, to think and maybe perhaps doing something as an update, or putting an offer out there for the update, perhaps thinking of how the elected members, you know, an offer, an invitation could be put out to become part of these regular community sessions that take place, that's beginning to look at the profile of our communities even closer. Thanks.
Councillor Stewart.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I've got 2 questions. So my first question would be on paragraph 38, when we're talking about the framework and the new framework that's just been opened and closed. And we're also saying about an extension to the current contracts that ends 30th of September, which is the end of this month. I suppose I'm seeking reassurance that the contracts that are in place just now will be finished in time, and if no, will the new contracts then just slip in and take place? And second question would be on paragraph 46, when we're talking about the COVID funds and having an underspend there. Will that get clawed back if it's no spent, and how much of an underspend do we have at present?
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. So I'll answer the first point, which is about the contract situation. So obviously Excel framework is there to represent all councils in regards to the negotiations, and we are regularly updated from providers themselves in terms of that negotiation and what that uplift may be. We have got some providers, not many, who we require to access out with the framework. And that's part of a requirement around particular need that provision may support. And there is individual negotiations that takes place in regard from our colleagues in finance and through our contracts and commission officer. But it does provide a level of stability and predictability, having that in terms of the projections that we've got. I do note that my colleague Alec McPhee's put his hand up, and Alec is sometimes far better placed with these points and questions. So I'll maybe pause there, maybe bring in Alec, and then I'll come back for your second point, if that's reasonable, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, Councillor Stewart, the COVID question is one that's kind of troubling everyone at this point in time. The COVID funding, some of that funding has been used to offset the out-with placements costs, and rightly so, but this funding is obviously time limited. There is no funding beyond the end of the current financial year. At this point in time, we're showing an underspend projected of 621,000 on out-with placements across the partnership. So if we take off the £762,000, which is currently being charged against COVID, that gives us a net overspend position of 141,000. All other things being equal going forward. So that's the situation we're in at this particular point in time. There is work ongoing, obviously, to reduce costs, as there always is, through the OPSG. Going back to the previous point regarding the budget, the budget is wholly delegated to the IGIB for out-with placements, and the costs are all picked up within that budget. Any additional support costs through education, where there are additional costs being incurred, is also charged across into the out-with placement budget. So that's the kind of history of the budget. In 2015-16, when the IGIB was established, a decision was taken to delegate the entire budget from the previous Department of Health and Social Services, into the IGIB, and it's always been run in that manner through the OPSG with the various disciplines within the OPSG group. So I hope that answers the question on the COVID issue as well. It is a financial risk which has been recognised within the reports to the IGIB this year so far.
Yep, thanks. Thanks for that.
Councillor Canny.
Thanks, thanks, Neil. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I just come back to David's point about staffing levels, and obviously 50 to 60% is a real concern. 70%, which is great, the work that's been done, sounds a bit better, but it's still a 30% shortfall. I mean, given the challenges, that's not likely to get any easier over the next little while. If we don't already get these numbers in another report, which I'm obviously not familiar with at the moment, would it be possible to get maybe a quarterly update on that number?
Yeah, that very difficulty to provide that level of reassurance. I think that's an area that is not going to necessarily have immediate results because of the nature of the recruitment strategy being aligned to the university pathways. There is a huge amount of work to reassure around trying to profile the benefits of East Ayrshire and some of the successes we've had around our children's services and strategic partnerships to try and attract experienced staff to come and work within. As I said, it's not necessarily localised for East Ayrshire Council. This is a national challenge around children's services, particularly around the additional investment that colleagues within adult services have been having, and some of the creativity they've been able to do around adult services, and from a national perspective, that's meant that some of the children and families social workers have left to move on to adults. So, but happy to kind of find some way or mechanism of providing an update on what the recruitment figures are. Thanks.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
Councillor Richardson.
Charles, just a quick question. You mentioned, because I'm by no means an expert in this field. So you mentioned the youngsters coming out as graduates out of university, and obviously all the local authorities across Scotland will probably be looking to recruit. Are there enough graduates coming out of university in this field, or nationally do we have a shortfall? Is that why local authorities are struggling to pick up new recruits? And I know it's got to be a mix. I know you can't have a workforce that's new graduates. You need the experienced people there as well. So I know that you need a good mix. You need the experience, and you need the new young guns coming in with all the enthusiasm, etc. I know you've got to watch that as well. But is there basically a shortfall of newly qualified social workers coming out of the unis?
Yeah, that was identified with 2020 Councillor Richardson in regards to the numbers coming through. It's unfortunately there is no additional support through the bursary scheme that students have been able to receive through social work and get into that social work qualification. What what we did is it had early communication through Social Work Scotland, through the Office of the Chief Social Work Officer within Scottish Government to profile this within government, and there was additional investment placed within the university routes and bursary scheme. Just to add on to that is that there has been a development within the Health and Social Care Partnership, in addition to some of the opportunities of that investment within the social work qualification route or the postgraduate route. There's been an agreement through our Strategic Commissioning Board around developing a kind of trainee social worker scheme within the East Ayrshire Health and Social Care Partnership, which is a response to some of our recruitment challenges, as well as we will be taking a number of non-qualified social work practitioners, ordinarily family support practitioners or social work assistants, with a huge level of experience, and we will be supporting them through the postgraduate route through the Open University, which is anticipated that they will qualify and be available within social workers in 2024. It's not an immediate response to this in terms of meeting that need, but it's kind of demonstrated the sort of the appetite from the partnership to look at all different options and avenues to develop that. And it's also a really good career pathway that we've developed as well to support, because we've recognised that the non-qualified social worker posts have not been the challenge to fill these posts as there has been for qualified. So the numbers coming through the routes universities this year was small. We are competing with other areas. Actually, we are competing really well in regards to our recruitment, because the timing of our recruitment and the nature of how well we've promoted and marketed East Ayrshire, we have got some really, really talented people that are coming out of university and joining us. But this is going to be huge. That's going to be effectively a marathon, not a sprint, to try and get back to that capacity. But it's also around the wisdom and experience. The other areas just around some of the developments we're going to be looking around advanced social work practice to begin to maybe develop something within East Ayrshire around attracting experienced qualified social workers with a level of historical complex case management experience that we can attract in. So there's some thought that's been given to that to develop a programme that might even enhance that further. So hopefully that gives additional reassurance, but kind of profiles the challenges that children's services are experiencing. Thanks.
Thank you, Charles. That was a really good answer, detailed. That's stuff we need to know. Cheers, mate.
Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, again, it's just on the back of that question, and obviously we've got it down as a medium risk. At what point, Charles, do you think that we would be like soaring towards like a low risk on that? And I do understand that it's a lot to do with recruitment, but when would we be looking at being a low risk in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably get into 2023. What I would say is that, we are absolutely committed to meet responsibilities, and we have been meeting responsibilities around our protection, public protection, child protection, our statutory responsibilities within that. The reason this was profiled within the paper was to recognise that there is a level of need and complex need that our colleagues in universal services are supporting, that perhaps the capacity of having social work support might not always necessarily be near at that point. That's not to say we're not still maintaining responsibilities of team around the child, but it's becoming increasingly difficult because we can't ask our social workers, our current social workers, to do the impossible beyond what they have been allocated and working with. And if you take an example, if we've got 5 vacancies, ordinarily, if that's 20 children, that's 100 children we may not necessarily be able to be allocated to support at that stage. And that would be around about the prioritisation framework, children with a lower level of need, priority 3, which would be that voluntary support and family support model. Anything that's within our statutory framework and public protection, we'll have allocated, and we'll continue to work to ensure that children who are identifying most at risk are receiving that support. Thanks.
Thanks very much, and just to let you know that we do appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this, especially the social workers that are working within like these conditions just now. So you can say thanks very much to them off of me anyway.
Councillor Stewart, I really do appreciate that. And I absolutely assure you I'll provide that message back, because I think sometimes some of our social workers have at times been lost and forgotten about, just because of what's went on in the last number of years, which is understandable, but they have been relentless and passionate in regards to going above and beyond, and I have been incredibly proud of what they have done. Thanks.
Alex Murphy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Charles mentioned obviously the trainee social worker scheme in the 2021-22 financial year. The IJB actually underspent. A decision was taken to allocate some of the underspend against what not only the Transformational Change Fund, but also a Workforce Development Fund. And that's where £500,000, that's where like the trainee social worker scheme has been funded from, that they can grow your own service. But this is symptomatic right across Scotland in terms of these posts. But I think the term someone used at a meeting I attended recently was we're all fishing out the same pool for staff. And it's not just children's services, it's allied health professions, it's district nursing, it's health visiting, a number of even support services we're struggling to recruit to. So the reality is here, we've set aside some of that, the last year's underspend, to take the opportunity to try and grow our own staff, particularly focusing on the kind of key areas of the service where the higher risk is, such as within children's services. Thanks, Chair.
Have we got any other further questions? Councillor Mayburn.
Just passing comment, page 21, paragraphs 46, 47, 48. My colleague June beside me has got a background in finance. I know Councillor Canning has an accountancy background, I believe. For me, that's got training in education and engineering. I'm struggling with all these numbers. 46, we've got a gross actual costs incurred that shows an overspend. However, after recovering COVID costs, the net cost, which is then an underspend, and this is repeated. I need some training on how budgeting and finance works, because I am struggling with those three paragraphs, to be honest. I would really like if someone could make that simpler in future, please. The question on table 3, paragraph 24. Preventative support, is it different from the residential support? I'm thinking a place like Benrick House and New Farm Loch is a residential support, and we're struggling with capacity. Do we actually need another place like Benrick House somewhere in East Ayrshire to help us out with capacity, so that we're not outsourcing out with East Ayrshire? Thank you.
So Councillor Mayburn, just to kind of add on, the preventative support is part of the education plans for children, and that is looking at opportunities to support perhaps children who are within our primary education setting or secondary education setting where there is additional need that's been identified, either through a learning need or through a contextual neurodevelopmental need. And what the recommendations are made by both the head teacher and the educational psychologists, in occasions in partnership with social work services and the team around the child, is an additionality that is looking to wrap around that child for a period of time. That could be additional classroom assistant or a classroom teacher to look to try and address a level of need. So that refers to, in regards to the question around children's Benrig in terms of the Children's House, is that it really the overall long-term strategy within the Children's Strategic Partnership, but also within Health and Social Care Partnership, is to try and reduce the overall number of children that is coming into our care, and for the supports to be built around children within their own communities. And that's really taking forward that rights-based approach about children's rights to be within families where it's safe to do so, but trying to support the need and the escalation of risk and need at an earlier point to reduce that. So we're looking to actually shift and move the other way in terms of trying to reduce these overall numbers, as difficult as it is. In regards to your request for the financial information to be presented perhaps in a different way, for next year, we'll be happy to look at that with colleagues in finance services and perhaps put it in a format that might meet that need better. Thank you.
And I've moved to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Maven, you're right, and we know that in terms of the member induction from May, we know that in terms of the Where the Money Goes document that's been circulated to all members and to CMT, and there's training arrangements booked for each group, which will be really helpful in going through the nuts and bolts of what is a budget and public sector finance, which is tricky. In terms of the paragraphs you note, I think the best way to describe it, and you'll hear more about this when we touch on East Ayrshire Performs later, is that it's a complex budget. And I suppose every accountant's going to say a budget is a complex budget. Essentially what we have here is a budget that has had substantial increased costs because of COVID. It's a budget that's allowed to submit an invoice, a mobilisation plan, but in layman's terms, an invoice to the Scottish Government for all costs associated with COVID. So you see that initial overspend, and then you see the invoice being paid, bringing it to an underspend. And the reassuring point in this is that the way the council works and the way that we have a relationship with the partnership is such that where a service does underspend, it gets to keep that underspend. So Councillor Stewart spoke about clawing back. It gets retained in there for the use within that service. So the training will pick up on that. Hope explains a bit about the paragraphs you mentioned. You'll hear more when we touch on East Ayrshire Performance Report. But like you, I'm looking forward to a cup of tea and doing the training in the next few weeks.
Go to Linda.
Yeah, thanks, and through you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to Councillor Maven's point and the points that Charles was making in and around the preventative spend. So just to say that we are hugely grateful for the support of clearly the council here in regards to recent discussions we've had with you around about the expansion of facilities like SL33 and our inclusion hubs. Clearly we're amidst a full inclusion review as well. So it was just to say to also consider that in this context, because I think really if we weren't investing in that way, these numbers would be significantly higher. And I think for all of us in the room and listening in online, the one thing we want is to have as many young people as we possibly can. Number one, resident in East Ayrshire, and number two, educated in East Ayrshire. So just to say that these all really tie up in terms of all of that, but to recognise the points made, you know, in terms of the number of young people at that preventative level that are overseen by the Education Service. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Richardson.
It was just really a sort of finance accountancy point for Joe, if possible. That was great to hear, Joe, that underspends can be kept within that department and, you know, maybe used in the following year, etc. But say a department, and I know there's certain types of finance that are ring-fenced, etc. But say a department had built up a rather large underspend and another department, something happened, unforeseen, was desperately needing funds. Now, I'm not saying that I would never suggest we take money away from social care here, but just let's say something happened in the education budget and we needed finance there quickly. Is it possible to take an underspend from one department to another department if we need to do that?
And through you, Chair. So, you know, it's a really good point. We do have pressures across the council. We have a reserve strategy that Hope keeps us in good stead when it comes to financial management. So the reserve strategy allows services to put aside balances year after year if they have a long-term project to reach. Where there is pressure in another service, then it would be for myself speaking with that service to try and provide support via approval here and at Cabinet by using a host of other means, either short-term funding through the general fund uncommitted balance and the like, so that there's no risk to service balances. What we do though, however, and we've done for many years in line with the requirements of our financial management arrangements and in line with audit requirements, is we do a full balances review, and that kicks off when the external audit concludes around about this time. And so between now and the end of the financial year, we do a review of every service balance, and we bring that back to both Cabinet and to here for review and for discussion. And at that point, where a service has a balance they no longer need, or has this happened in the past, where collectively the council believes that whilst that balance was a genuine and needed balance maybe 3 years ago, today's priorities are such that it ranks lower than it previously did. And in those instances, we take that money back and we put it back into the general uncommitted balance to support those other services.
Thanks, Joe. Cheers.
Okay, have we got any further questions on this report? So if we go to page 13, section 2, are we happy as a committee to agree the recommendations? Okie doke. So if we move to page 23, we have the report on Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Commissioning Board's annual report, and I shall go to Alex McPhee.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Members have probably gathered I'm a numbers man as well. I'm Alex McPhee and I'm the Interim Chief Finance Officer for the IGB. I'm here to present the report today on behalf of Craig MacArthur, who's the Director of Health and Social Care. So the purpose of the report is to provide the Governance and Scrutiny Committee with information on the activity and progress of the Health and Social Care Partnership Strategic Commissioning Board for the financial year 2021-22. As highlighted in paragraph 3 of the report, the role and the scope of the board has evolved over time to provide oversight for transformation, innovation and service redesign across the full range of health and social care services delegated to the IGB by both the Council and also by NHS Ayrshire and Arran. The board has delegated responsibility to oversee the Transformational Change Fund on behalf of the Audit and Performance Committee and onwards to the IGB itself. And the board is co-chaired by Craig MacArthur as Chief Officer and myself as Interim Chief Finance Officer, with wide representation from colleagues in finance, human resources, the trade unions, staff partnership and operational heads of service and managers. The board met on 10 occasions over the course of 2021-22, and a summary of activity is presented in the table at paragraph 4 within the report. This includes reporting on existing transformational programmes, update reports on new service redesign, efficiency savings proposals and progress updates in respect of best value service reviews as part of the ongoing three-year review programme. And paragraph 6 to 8 of the report provides information on the Transformational Change Fund. This was initially established in 2017-18 when the Council allocated £1 million of non-recurring funding for transformational change purposes within health and social care. And since then, this fund has been topped up via IGB approved reallocation of uncommitted balances, with the most recent allocation being £909,000, which was approved by the IGB on the 17th of August as part of the approval of the audited accounts for 2021-22. And I've already mentioned that there was a further £500,000 was allocated for workforce development purposes, which obviously is designed to tackle some of the difficulties we've spoken about when Charles was presenting the previous report. And the IGB outturned by £4.205 million less than budget in 2021-22, and of this, the uncommitted balance of £909,000 was allocated to the change programme. And obviously the workforce element of that, the £500,000, is in relation to the challenges. The £2.796 million balance has been set aside for general contingency purposes, and that's a separate fund which is within unallocated balances within the IGB, and this is in line with the aspirational 2% target in the approved IGB reserve strategy. Paragraph 8 of the report highlights that over the course of 2021-22, 14 applications for funding totalling £1.282 million have been approved by the Commissioning Board, and after taking account of these applications as well as previously committed expenditure of £2.163 million, there is a balance of funding of £1.997 million at 31st of March 2022, and this takes account of the additional £909,000 previously highlighted. The Commissioning Board has met on 3 occasions so far in the current financial year, and the next meeting is actually taking place at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Paragraphs 9 to 17 of the report provide information of 2 initiatives approved by the Commissioning Board in 2021-22, namely Wellbeing, Recovery and Renewal and the Community Peer Outreach Service linked to addictions. And paragraphs 18 to 20 provide information on the Best Value Service Review programme, which is being progressed through the Commissioning Board and was going forward and was progressed during 2021-22. Paragraphs 21 to 27 provide information on the adult day opportunities best value service review. And this highlights the option appraisal process, with the model selected being a mixed model, providing support in day centres within community and via digital and technology, and that's technology-enabled care. And finally, the recommendations are as set out at paragraph 2 of the report. Thanks, Chair.
Have we any questions for Alex? Councillor Kyle. Councillor Kyle, Mike.
There's an uncommitted balance of nearly £2 million. Are there any proposals maybe to put some of that towards to bolster the cost of the living crisis at the moment?
Obviously, there's an uncommitted balance on the transformational change fund itself, which is mentioned within the report, and there's also an uncommitted balance of the 2%, which I mentioned in the presentation. There is a paper coming to the Commission board this afternoon by Joe Gibson, who's one of our heads of service, and that's in relation to proposals for enhancing services and supports for individuals with mental health, alcohol and drug problems. So that, I think, will supplement the approval which East Ayrshire Cabinet made fairly recently. I think it was initiatives totaling just over £2 million. So there is a proposal there, obviously, which would obviously be subject to approval of the IGIB.
Councillor Cogley.
Thank you. I see that there's £25,000 allocated to financial inclusion officers at GP practices, and then in the table on page 24, there's a little bit more information about that. What could you tell us what this actually is, please?
I think it's in recognition. Obviously, there's a lot of difficulties out there at the minute in terms of the cost of living crisis, and obviously GP practices are accessible places where people can obviously access services. And the idea was to place the financial inclusion officers basically at the root of the communities within these locations to enable people to obviously access the services and obviously income generation, welfare benefits and so on. So we have been getting fairly good success, as my understanding of that, from John Dalton, who leads on that within the partnership.
Thank you. I can certainly see the logic behind that. And you say that you've identified 7 practices. Which are you allowed to tell us which practices those are?
Honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know. I can get an answer to you from John in relation to that. But I think that initially the idea was it was where they identified the highest level of need. I think that was the kind of underlying idea around this. I think ideally we would like to expand that out further, but that's obviously dependent on further funding becoming available or that being agreed through the integration board.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. It would be interesting to know, actually. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. It's just on the transformation fund, and I'm seeing here that we were looking to implement support for the Heart multidisciplinary community team. So it said we were going to put 3 new coordinators in place. I suppose my question is, are they in place? Are they working at this present time?
I think I'm going to hand you over to Charles to answer that question. I'm not actually sure in terms of what the operational arrangements are there, Charles.
Thanks, Alex, and through yourself, Chair. Councillor Stewart, no, we're going out for recruitment for that. Obviously, there's a period of creating the job description and looking to try and manoeuvre around job evaluation to try and get these posts out at an earlier stage. So these have now been defined and they're at a point of going out for recruitment. So we hope to have them in place, and it's incredibly open to create that sort of community profile and links, perhaps with opportunities like community groups, parent councils and other things that are going to look to try and best represent these community groups within the strategic multi-agency supports that are around as well. Thanks.
Great, that's great. Thanks very much for that. The other thing I'd just like to highlight is a lot of the good work that's going on with our peer recovery stuff in our local communities. I'm watching it every day. I'm actually part of one in the Melton area. I'm watching Cumnock and Auchinleck and Shortleys and seeing people engaging in recovery and getting better, or feeling better about themselves, is a really, really great achievement for East Ayrshire Council, and I really think that I just want to commend the work that's going on there just now. I think it's really good, and I think we've hit the nail on the head by getting the grassroots peer mentors in there. I think that's the way we should have been going for the beginning.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Maiden.
Hiya. Transformation Fund Programme, page 24. The second box down, wellbeing support for the workforce. 3 wellbeing coordinators, I believe. I'm wondering about best value. How has this helped with having these wellbeing support coordinators, and what was the cost of that?
Yeah, wellbeing support coordinators, recognition that obviously staff have been under a lot of stress over the course of the pandemic. While obviously people were working from home, a lot of the staff within, or most of the staff within health and social care centres were out there at the coal face at the front line at that point in time. So obviously that's in recognition of that. In terms of the cost of that, I would have to come back to you on that, Councillor, just to double check what the current arrangements are. In relation to that, I can come back to you on that and give you an answer to that at a later stage. I don't have it actually here in front of me at this point, sorry.
David Dorn.
Thanks, Chair. Just in response to your question, Councillor Maben, the wellbeing coordinators are volunteers or within the staff group, so there's no actual cost involved in those wellbeing coordinators picking up that role.
Thanks for that. Paragraph 5, page 25. The final IGB budget. East Ayrshire Council picked up 100,000 of it. NHS Ayrshire 185. So adding those together doesn't make the total of 317. Did East Ayrshire Council pick up the rest of it, or the Scottish Government give money to pick up the rest, or was it money we already had anyway?
Yeah, I think that's good. I think it might be a typo in the report there. I can come back to you on that and confirm that as well. But the numbers there, I think the council numbers look fairly accurate, and the NHS numbers, I think it's the total that looks as if it might be slightly out. So it's 100 million from the council and 185 million from the NHS board.
Councillor Stewart.
Hi, just a wee question on the primary care mental health team. I see that that we're improving access. I'm just wondering, it's a really good strategy, but how long is it taking children, young people and people within our communities to access this service? Has it made it quicker? That's what I'm looking at.
Again, it's difficult for me to kind of comment from the kind of operational side in terms of the financial side here. I could get information, I could speak to Eric Sullivan to get back to you on that one, Councillor, if that's okay. Get back to you at a later stage.
Yep, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Any further, Councillor Maben?
I'm allowed back in again.
Yes.
Page 28, paragraph 22 about adult day opportunities. Can someone explain to me a wee bit what more technology enabled care solutions actually is? Thank you.
I think one way to describe it is things like community alarms and so on, and obviously like the buzzers and things that adults and elderly people are actually using. I think this is more a kind of mixed economy we're now using, where instead of maybe people being in daycare services just for as long that they're at home and that they're coping within their own homes, there is a lot of new technology out there which enables people to remain at home for that bit longer. I think that's in recognition that it is safer for people to be at home, particularly during the pandemic, and there's things like flu epidemics and so on. They've taken a kind of balanced view of that. tapped into some of these solutions. There is I think it's the place that the CVO run in the centre of Kilmarnock. There is a whole floor there, and they actually do. They look at these solutions in terms of how to work with tech solutions. There has been quite a lot of investment in that over the piece through the partnership. So that's that. This is all solutions that are basically making it easier for people to live at home and having that level of independence to remain at home.
Any further questions? Okay, so we shall move to page 23, section 2. Is the committee happy to take the recommendations? Yeah. Okay. So if we move to page 32, the annual assurance statement, and I shall go to Lisa Punton.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, colleagues and members. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to submit the annual assurance statement for 2022 to the Scottish Housing Regulator and to seek agreement of the annual assurance statement improvement action plan. I will refer to the Scottish Housing Regulator as a regulator from now on. Recommendations are noted at paragraph 2 of the report. To provide background, you will recall that in February 2019, the regulator published its revised regulatory framework, the Regulation of Social Housing in Scotland. The framework sets out the regulatory requirements which must be met by all social landlords in Scotland. For local authorities, the requirements cover the 5 broad areas stated within paragraph 3. Central to the framework is that landlords assure themselves, their tenants and the regulator that they comply with regulatory requirements. Paragraphs 5 to 8 describe the timescale for submission of the annual assurance statement, landlords' compliance with all of the relevant regulatory requirements within the framework, and what action is required where a landlord does not fully comply, along with the format of the statement and its publication. You will note that Council's proposed annual assurance statement for 2022 is available at Appendix 3 to this report. Paragraphs 9 and 10 describe how a landlord gains assurance on its compliance with the requirements and the recommendation to keep a record of the evidence used in getting the necessary assurance on compliance with the requirements. The evidence does not require to be submitted to the regulator. However, they may ask to see the evidence or elements of it if they are engaging with a landlord. In order to gain assurance and compliance, a self-assessment matrix has been developed and can be seen at Appendix 1, setting out each of the relevant regulatory requirements and the associated evidence used to gain assurance. Members will note within Appendix 1 the Amber RAG status. The Amber status is solely as a result of the improvement action detailed at Appendix 2 and the requirements of the Housing Scotland Act 2014 on all landlords in Scotland to have an electrical installation condition report carried out on all electrical installations, fixtures and fittings within the rental properties by the 31st of March 2022. All other regulatory requirements within this section have been met. In the annual return on the Charter 21-22, we reported that 961 self-contained properties were in abeyance with the Scottish Housing Quality Standards, with 810 of these as a result of outstanding electrical installation condition reports. This was due to significant challenges in accessing homes and available resource due in the main to COVID-19. All of these outstanding works are planned to be complete over the reporting year 22-23, and as of Monday, the 12th of September, 521 of the 810 reports have been completed and are now compliant with the remaining 289 programmed for completion by December 2022. Paragraphs 11 to 16 describe non-compliance and what a landlord should do when it identifies areas for improvement and how appropriate action should be agreed to address these areas. Not all areas of non-compliance need to be recorded in the statement. It is up to landlords to reach a judgment on whether the issue identified is material or significant, with any areas of material non-compliance disclosed in the statement. There are a number of areas which local authorities must consider. Paragraph 12 provides succinct reasons to determine non-compliance. This section also provides guidance on non-compliance and engagement with the regulator, and that the regulator may reach a different view on whether an issue is material if they're engaging with a landlord at a later date, and that this is a matter of judgment. When a landlord identifies an area for improvement and discloses this in its statement, the regulator will not necessarily engage with them. A progress update in the Council's annual assurance statement action plan for 2022 can be found at Appendix 2 to this report, and that further highlights the planned work in relation to the electrical installation condition report. Within policy and community planning implications, the Council's annual assurance statement provides assurance to us as a landlord, tenants and other service users that we comply with the regulatory requirements and supports the vision and priorities within the East Ayrshire Community Plan and associated delivery plans. Within legal and risk implications, should the Council fail to submit an annual assurance statement to the regulator by the 31st of October 2022, it would be a breach of the regulatory requirements which are based on the statutory powers given to the regulator in the House in Scotland Act 2010. There are no direct human resources, equality impact, financial or net zero implications arising from this report. Members, to conclude, this is a very positive report demonstrating the continued commitment and breadth of work carried out in ensuring our compliance with the regulatory requirements. The submission of the Council's annual assurance statement to the regulator by the 31st of October 2022 will ensure compliance with its regulatory framework. And you'll note the background papers listed at the end of the report. That concludes the report, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. Is there any questions for Lisa? Councillor Stewart.
Yep, that is a really good report. Thanks very much, Lisa. The only thing that's concerning me is the electrical, the 289 outstanding electrical reports. If something had to happen in one of those properties before we go to them, what are the implications for the council? Do we have something in place to mitigate it?
Through you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Stewart, I'm not quite sure about the question.
So we've got 289 outstanding EICRs within the council just now. If at any point before December we had to have an unfortunate fire caused by electrical fault, where do we in the council stand with that? Because we haven't got round to doing the reports. I suppose that's what I'm looking for to be answered.
I think it's unprecedented because it's a new requirement that's placed on us. We would deal with it as we would deal with anything else in that situation. I think the situation that we're in, anecdotally, the feedback from the regulator is that we're in a good position in the way that we've recovered from the scenario, and that there wasn't any alternative for us, which I think across the country, every other local authority is in the same place. So we're reassured actually with where we are as opposed to being in a negative position, but we would just need to wait and see what the circumstances were and deal with it appropriately at the time.
Councillor Richardson.
Yeah, I think Councillor Stewart's question's a pretty good one. I mean, my understanding would be, and officers can correct me if I'm wrong here, but East Ayrshire Council will have a block policy over all of our properties, I would think. And would it be a case of, should we maybe check with our insurers, whoever they are, that the fact we haven't done an EICR check in these properties, would that negate a claim in our block policy? Should we maybe check that out?
I'll go to Joe.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose here there are two parts to it. The first is that there's a piece of work needing done. It's a relatively new piece of work, and it's a piece of work that's been hindered because of access challenges and the pressures and the restrictions placed on the council and other organisations by the pandemic. So there's a willingness to do the work. There's money set aside to do the work. We've had difficulty trying to get in to do the work. So when it comes to anything happening, if that was to ever happen, then the insurance policy would of course pay out, but they would be mindful of the works that we'd done. We'd risk assessed, we had work planned, we just couldn't get access. We've also, more importantly for this one, we've got a hook at the end, we've got a timeline by December this year. So based on all of that, I'm content to say that our insurer would be satisfied with our approach.
David Mitchell.
Just to reinforce that from a legal position, unless there's express provision that any duty of care or any potential liability in any legal relationship is either an absolute liability or a strict liability, then the normal duty of care such would apply here is one which requires both parties to take such reasonable precautions as would be required to prevent or minimise the risk of harm. In the context of us trying to gain access to a tenant's home to conduct a condition survey of the wiring that may or may not lead to the identification of the need for repairs, then the actions of that tenant would be the first. So if there's a tenant that's not letting us in, there would need to be regard had to that, to the overall claim. There would also need to be clear regard to how did the fire start and would anything in a condition survey have been likely to have made any difference. So it wouldn't just be the absence of the survey in itself directly meant there's a connection. There would need to be that link of, had we done the survey, you would have found the thing that needed fixed to prevent the incident occurring. In terms of how do you fulfil your duty of care when you're an organisation with 6,000 employees and 350 million of a budget, then there is recognition that reasonably practicable includes having regard to the scale of the task, the resources available to the organisation and the attempts made by the organisation to fulfil its statutory responsibilities. So as Joe has said, if we can evidence, as clearly we can, there is an ongoing programme here by which we are looking to fulfil our statutory requirement in all cases, but we are making good progress, however, are unable to get into every door by a certain date, then we keep going. But the bottom line would be having regard to the resources available, the number of properties, the scale of the task, how long does this survey take, etc., 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 then that would be the assessment. Did we make reasonable effort to carry out the condition survey? And if the answer was yes, then that would be the end of that analysis. If the answer was no, there would still need to be consideration of whether the absence of the survey in itself could be proven in the context of a particular claim to have had a direct contributory effect or not. So there's a lot of variables in there, but in essence, it should not compromise it, particularly where we can evidence we're trying to get into properties and the tenant themselves, maybe not deliberately, maybe they're working, maybe they're just not available. But if we can show that we're making reasonable attempt and following up to the ones we can't get in, then it wouldn't be a problem.
Councillor Cogley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Gary. As an elected member, most of the housing queries that come to me and that land either in my inbox or on my phone or at the end of whatever form of communication relate to small landlords who have perhaps 1, 2 or 3 properties and don't look after them properly. And Gary, you're aware of this because we've been on a sort of walkabout a couple of months ago. And for me, it's the control or lack of control that we have over this particular cohort of landlords that actually gives me some real concern, because some of these properties are absolutely dreadful and real safety concerns. And it's how do we set about changing these, or how do we implement controls and regulations over this particular cohort of properties or landlords, as distinct from probably the bigger volume landlords, which I think we probably regulate fairly well. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Cogley. You're absolutely right. I'm aware of the walkabouts recently and certainly the concerns that have been raised in respect to private landlords in the area. I'm aware that a member officer working group has been established with the private rented sector, and we'll work together to take forward these issues collectively. Thank you.
Yeah, are there any further questions? Councillor Maben.
It's page 36, appendix 1. It's the paragraph right down at the bottom. Is contracts in place with subcontractors to ensure compliance with health and safety standards. How much does that cost us for these subcontractors? Why are we subcontracting? Can't we do that in-house with our own staff? Or if not, can we train people to do it ourselves in-house rather than paying money to subcontractors?
Go to Gary Craig.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, we've got a mixed economy, as we have had for a number of years, with partner organisations to assist and smooth the resource There's a lot of work which we have taken in-house, which was previously outsourced. For instance, statutory gas servicing was previously partly outsourced. We brought whatever we could in-house, but we've clearly got last year's cabinet paper would show you from the House and Cabinet in November that there's significant areas of concern around recruitment across the whole business and across the whole country for specialist trades. So the model that we have, we've actually increased the amount of work that we've done in-house, but we feel that we've got a fairly balanced approach to it now.
Councillor Cogley.
You've not actually said the cost, or do we not know the cost?
The cost of what particular area? You're talking about every single subcontractor that we use, or? Okay, yeah, we can give you that. That went out to the market to an open tender at the beginning of the process for that. But yeah, I can provide that to you.
Sorry for that. Sorry about that, Councillor Maven. Councillor Cogley.
Yes, just to come back on that, my earlier point, Lisa, you mentioned the member officer working group. Now, maybe this is my error, but I wasn't aware that, while I'm massively in support of such a group, I wasn't aware that one had actually been set up. And if so, I would like to be a part of it.
Through you, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Cogley. You're absolutely right. It's not in place yet, but plans are underway to get this, and you would be an absolute key member of that group. Thank you.
Thank you. I was suffering a bit of FOMO there.
Councillor Canning.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Just a quick one. Apologies if I've missed it somewhere else in the report, but does the EICR report include the new regulations around the fire alarms? And if not, can you give us an update on the status of that? Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, through your chair, that's separate legislation, and we're fully compliant with that.
Thanks.
Any further questions on this report? Okay, so we shall go to page 32. Are the committee happy to take the recommendations at section 2? Yep. Okay, fine. Right, I'm now going to jump slightly to page 98 for Aileen Mackay's report on the East Ayrshire Integration Joint Board Internal Audit Annual Update Report.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, members. You'll be glad to know it's a short report from me today. So I'll highlight some of the key paragraphs and then take questions. This is an established annual report that comes to you to reflect the work that's carried out for the internal audit work that's carried out for the Integration Joint Board. So this has been an established report since the inception of the IJB in 2015-16. The internal audit team that services the IJB is made up of resources from our internal audit team within the council and NHS Ayrshire and Arran's internal audit team, and I oversee that work with my IJB chief auditor hat on. It's what we would call a small audit universe in the IJB. So the IJB doesn't have much in terms of operational transactions, very little. So as you know, it's a decision-making body, decision, commission and monitoring. So it doesn't have, unlike the council, it doesn't have any employees, it has no bank accounts, it has no contracts. So it's a different, very different type of entity. So the number of internal audit days that we allocate to the entity that is the IJB are relatively small. And you'll see that summarised in the report. And you'll know that from the days that you allocate to the IJB within the council's audit plan. which was 35 for this year. It's a positive report. I would say that, wouldn't I, as the Chief Auditor of the IGIB, but you get assurance on that from external audit, and I'll pick that up within the report because that, again, is your assurance that you can rely on the work of the internal audit teams. So if I highlight just a few of the paragraphs, Chair. In terms of the background, at paragraph 5, just really summarises what I've been saying, that the intention of this report was to give the audit committees of the 2 parent bodies of the Council and the NHS assurance that there was effective, proportionate and appropriate internal audit arrangements. And really the proportionate and appropriate is linked to the size of that audit universe, which is very small. So we don't allocate a huge number of days, but a proportionate number of days to the IGIB. If I move on, sharing of reports with elected members is reflected at paragraph 7. It was very, very important when the IGIBs were set up that there was reciprocal sharing and transparency between the parent bodies and the IGIB. So as elected members in the council, you get access to key reports for the IGIB, and they're all placed on your portal within the councillors, the internal audit area within the councillors notice board. Equally, the IGIB gets some relevant reports from the council, because as well as the IGIB work we carry out, the IGIB are interested in some of the wider work that we do for the council and colleagues in the NHS do for the NHS. So, for example, if the NHS internal audit team carried out some work on primary care arrangements, that would be of interest to the IGIB. So, as well as specific work done for the IGIB, those wider reports are made available as well to all of the IGIB members. If I move on, the IGIB, paragraph 10, we refer to the IGIB internal audit annual report and opinion. So you're familiar with the annual report and opinion for the council that I bring up to committee every year. This is exactly the same protocol. It's carried out under the same legislation and it has the same requirements. So sufficient work has to be carried out for the IGIB in order for me to be able to provide an opinion. And I'm happy to say that since the inception of the IGIB, sufficient work has been carried out year on year to provide an annual opinion. And you'll see at paragraph 14 that annual opinion continues to be that reasonable assurance can be placed on the IGIB's overall adequacy and effectiveness of the organisation's framework of governance, risk management and control. And we also put a wee bit more context around the presentation of that opinion in paragraph 14, because we need to remember that the IGIB is quite a complex body. It has relatively complex governance arrangements. It has 2 parent bodies, the council and the NHS, and it also operates across 3 council areas with some initiatives pan-Ayrshire. So we have lead arrangements in place through the IGIB. For example, North Ayrshire leads on mental health. So there's that complexity within the arrangements. So as an internal audit team, we work very closely with our colleagues in the other 2 IGIBs, which includes the NHS internal auditors. So if I move on to paragraph 16 and 17, which highlights for you external audit's opinion of the arrangements for the IGIB. And no issues have ever been raised by external audit with regards to the internal audit arrangements for the IGIB. And in fact, at paragraph 17, you'll see words that are very, very similar to their conclusion for the internal audit work that we do for the council. So they've concluded that the internal audit provision for the IGIB is robust. And in addition to that, there's appropriate arrangements for the prevention and detection of fraud and error. Fraud and error is highly unlikely within the confines of the IGIB, given the audit universe that I've described earlier, with no contracts, no bank accounts, no staff. I usually say to external audit, I'll give you my month's salary if you ever find a fraud or an error in So I'm not confident there will be no fraud, or perhaps no fraud in there, but it's still important that we review the governance, the risk management and the control arrangements. The IGIB internal audit plan for 22-23 is outlined at paragraphs 18 and 19. And members will remember that you have the first step in facilitating this plan in agreeing days for the IGIB. So when you approve the internal audit plan for the council, you approve a number of days for the IGIB, and this year that was 35 days. And then we take those days along with NHS days to the IGIB Audit and Performance Committee, which is your equivalent within the IGIB, and they then look at detailed options for the audit plan. And the final audit plan that was agreed for 22-23 is laid out at paragraph 19. I would also draw your attention to the link at paragraph 18. At the end of paragraph 18, I've provided a link to the full report that was considered by the IGIB Audit and Performance Committee when they approved the 22-23 plan. And because there was a lot of new members on the IGIB Audit and Performance Committee this year, I provided a history of all the work that we've carried out since 2015-16. So it's probably useful for members who are less familiar with the IGIB and want to know the history of the work that we've carried out along with our NHS colleagues. All of that is included in that report at the link on page 101. So you'll see in the table under paragraph 19 the various items. I think they get pretty good value for the 35 days that we give them. We provide a lot of work within that 35 days. And the items on it are the items you would imagine. We've got National Care Service. We're also looking at third sector delivery partners this year. So actually the first two bullets are now the plan. We put some flexibility into the plan because we weren't sure if we would need to go to the OR option, the performance indicators, but there's been enough information coming out in the National Care Service for us to do some initial risk assessment around that. So that's our priority there. We're also carrying out, as you can see, a self-assessment for the IGIB Audit Committee, and that mirrors the arrangements that we've put in place over the last couple of years for the Governance and Scrutiny Committee, which I think brought some added value, and that will continue annually. So we're bringing that good practice into the IGIB Audit and Performance Committee as well. So again, just the last paragraph I wanted to highlight, Chair, was just paragraph 20. And I think I mentioned earlier that we do work very much as a sort of pan-Ayrshire approach to the IGIBs. Risks are common across the IGIBs, and the three chief auditors of the IGIBs, who happen to be the three chief auditors of the council, meet on a regular basis, and along with NHS colleagues. And we aim for the NHS work to be pan-Ayrshire in a common exercise across the three Ayrshire IGIBs. That doesn't always work out, but in most years it's been the case that one common exercise is done. So the 30 days that are allocated by the NHS are used to benefit all three councils in one larger exercise. But those NHS days can, if need be disaggregated across the three IGIBs. But we do work very closely together to share risk and share best approach to the utilisation of the audit days. So hopefully that's given you some assurance about the oversight of internal audit around the IGIB. And as always, Chair, happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ailey. Are there any questions on this report? No, that's fine. So if we go to page 98, the recommendations at section 2, are we happy to accept those? Thank you, Ailey. Right. If we now move to page 44, which is East Ayrshire Performs Summary Report, and I shall go to Julie Jamieson.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Members, this is the first East Ayrshire Performance Report of this financial year. It was presented to Cabinet early in September, and it that collates finance and service-based performance and gives members an indication of where we are at period 4 this year. If we can start at paragraph 7 in the main report on page 46, here we can see that the Council's general fund uncommitted balance is forecast to be £8.7 million or 2.4%. This is the first time for a number of years that our balance has been below £9 million, and this is towards the lower end of the range set out in our reserve strategy. This is something we are closely monitoring and will come back to elected members and political groups with proposals around this in due course. The report also captures details of the savings that were approved as part of this year's budget. We note at paragraph 8 that at this point in time, services are saying that these options are either green and achieved or progressing towards being achieved. Information on service budgets begins at paragraph 9, and previous East Ayrshire performance reports for the last 2 years have been heavily impacted by COVID and how this has affected service budgets in terms of the costs or the loss of income that the Council has experienced. In this report, it's good to see that the impact of the pandemic is leaving some services, but there are still some areas where COVID remains and continues to present challenges to the services and to budgets. Members, we note at paragraph 9 that education is anticipated to end the year with an overspend of just over £300,000. This is due to employee costs in early years and central resources, as well as additional transport costs within additional support for learning, and this has been reviewed by the Education Service. Within communities and economy, services are anticipating to end the year by £463,000 over budget, and this is mainly due to the challenges being experienced by the Ayrshire Roads Alliance in terms of education transport for primary and secondary, which is currently £600,000 over budget. This has been reviewed by the Deputy Chief Executive and the Chief Financial Officer, with proposals to be brought back to members in due course. In addition to this, there continues to be challenges around parking income, which is still lower than expected in terms of the overall budget. Cabinet approved the transfer of £490,000 from the Council's COVID recovery funding to mitigate the impact this year, recognising that while income is recovering, there still remains uncertainty as to whether it will ever fully recover to pre-pandemic levels. Paragraph 11 notes that health and social care is anticipated to underspend by just under £300,000, but it's important to highlight the significant COVID issues that continue to impact on this budget. Essentially, the service has incurred costs to date of £3.6 million due to COVID and the requirement to sustain private care homes, purchase PPE, as well as experiencing additional costs for home care and for outwith placements. In previous years, the partnership was permitted to submit mobilisation plans to the Scottish Government to seek recovery of these costs, and these costs were fully funded. This is no longer the case, and at the end of March this year, the Scottish Government passed £13 million of funding to the partnership to see them through future COVID and COVID recovery. At period 4, the partnership is using £3.6 million of this money, and there is still significant pressure on this budget due to COVID, and this is made worse as well by the cost of living pressures. The net position is a variance of £3.9 million. Paragraph 12 notes the funding gap estimated by the West of Scotland Climbing Centre above Adventure. This is an external project that has received RCGF funding from the Scottish Government via the Council. The Council applies for this funding and passes it on to the group, but if anything was to go wrong with the project, then the Council, per the conditions of grant, could be liable to pay the RCGF monies to Scottish Government, and currently this is around £2 million. The project has intimated that again they have a gap in their capital funding of around £550,000, and this has been discussed extensively within the Council and with the group, who have assured officers that this latest request will allow the capital works to complete and the project to open. Members at Cabinet expressed concerns around the Council's exposure and the requirement to seek a fourth RCGF grant of around £400,000 to bridge the gap. Following extensive discussion, Cabinet agreed to approve the allocation of £150,000 from Finance and ICT balances, subject to Scottish Government funding being provided to bridge the funding gap for the group. The latest position is that Scottish Government officials are continuing to assess the request for further funding and are endeavouring to source the possible additional grant required. Paragraphs 14 through to 16 set out the proposals to use a range of balances to create an employability hub for young people in Cumnock. Members will be aware of the incredible work that the SL33 Centre in Titchfield Street does to support unemployed young people and school learners. The centre delivers training and learning to support opportunities for employment. plan is to replicate this environment by providing a base income not called SL66, and Cabinet approved the use of £50,000 met jointly from Finance and ICT, Facilities and Property Management and Education balances to allow the refurbishment of the former Nether Third Library. The ongoing cost to run the facility will be met from within the existing budget, which is good news. Paragraph 17 provides members with an update on the work that's been done by the trustees of the Dark Sky Observatory in Dunmellington. We note the agreement that has been reached with their insurers to meet the full reinstatement cost of the former facility, which is good news. The trustees are keen to build on ambitions around access and net zero and ask the council to support a feasibility study to allow these two elements to be explored. Cabinet approved the request for £10,000 to be utilised from communities and economy balances to fund the study and to allow the scoping exercise to take place. The remaining paragraphs in the revenue budget from paragraphs 18 note the Boswell Book Festival, which the council has supported in the past by providing multi-year funding. The festival has been adversely impacted by the pandemic, and the trust requested a further 3 years funding support is provided. Through discussions with the trustees, it became evident that there were benefits for the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust and the Boswell Trust to develop closer links. This will maximise opportunity for both organisations and develop closer working relationships with both festivals. Cabinet approved an allocation of £15,000 from Finance and ICT balances for each of the next 3 years to support the festival, and a further £10,000 will be provided by the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust for the next 3 years. This recognises the benefits that will accrue from both the economic assessment and the closer working relationship between both trusts. Paragraph 22 touches on the capital programme, noting the works at Boswell Crescent in Logan and East Park Drive in Comores. A number of issues have resulted in additional works, and Cabinet approved that these costs can be met from other areas of the capital improvement budget. Chair, the sections in people and health and safety are covered in more detail in the summary report, and colleagues will take members through these areas. Finally, paragraph 32 notes the corporate risk register with a further update provided in the summary report. Chair, I propose that I stop here and take questions at this point. Thank you.
Right, okay. Have we got any questions, members? Councillor Cogley.
Actually, it's not a question, it's just a comment. SL33 in Kilmarnock.
Councillor Cogley, your mic needs to come down.
Sorry. This particular group in the previous session visited SL33 in Kilmarnock, and I would recommend that anybody who hasn't yet visited does so, because it really is fantastic, and I'm delighted to see the development of SL66. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Any further questions? Councillor Maben.
I would just totally agree with Councillor Cogley there. My youngest son is in at SL33 just now, learning to do his CS card. That's the safety certificate to get on construction sites, and they've been a big help to him, and hopefully he'll get into full employment soon enough. They're a good bunch down there. They do a lot of great work, and it's nice to see it being replicated.
Thank you, Councillor Maben. Okay, so I'll now pass to Julie again for the covering report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the summary report begins on page 53 of your papers and provides some further detail in some of the comments I mentioned earlier. It shows that education has pressures in terms of staff turnover, and also notes the work being undertaken around additional support for learning, including transport. Within Finance and ICT and Governance, there are service redesigns taking place which will see both services manage posts and vacancies in advance of the reviews. The Finance and ICT service redesign will be presented to Cabinet in the next few months. People and Culture and Corporate Support have no variances to report at this time. In terms of communities and economy, we see variances projected across the services. As I mentioned earlier, there are pressures in the Ayrshire Roads Alliance around parking income and school transport, which the Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Financial Officer are working on. Proposals will be brought back to members in due course. In housing and communities, there are additional costs around staffing and fuel, and also temporary accommodation expenditure. Additional funding was provided to the service as part of the Council's budget in February for the new waste contract, and this brings some stability to this budget and the service going forward. Members, the position for wellbeing is shown at the bottom of the page, and as explained earlier, the underspend reflects several variances across the service and the support being provided internally in the Council in terms of care at home and delayed discharge. It also reflects the external support being provided to the care home sector in respect of sustainability payments and PPE. And as noted previously, this means the service will draw £3.6 million from their COVID balance. Under central services, there's a variance of £500,000, and this reflects an increase in the number of applications for council tax reduction. We get a budget from Scottish Government of around £9.5 million a year to provide council tax reduction, and based on the applications we have, our current projection is that we'll be spending around £10 million. This gives an indication of the assistance asked for by our households across East Ayrshire. At the top of page 56, we note details of the council's funding. I should mention that this report takes account of the position at the end of period 4 following discussions with chief officers and budget holders. It doesn't yet reflect any adjustment for the revised pay award offer that was made to the SJC group of employees. As members will be aware, the offer is 5% or a flat cash uplift for the lowest paid employees and capped at the higher end of the pay grades, with some additional Scottish Government funding to meet the additional cost. It means that if accepted, the Council will have a shortfall in the current year of around £2 to £3 million. This, members, will be a recurring shortfall, and work is ongoing to try to find ways to bridge the gap. More details will be provided in the weeks ahead and, of course, brought back to members. The House and Revenue account position is shown further down the page on page 56. It's currently anticipated that there will be an underspend of £1.2 million. As with some other services, this budget has been impacted by the pandemic and the restrictions that were required over the last 2 years, particularly in respect of housing improvements in the capital programme, where there's an increasing levels of works and jobs that have to be undertaken. The underspend will be retained by the service to take this work forward. The report notes that the position is mainly due to an under-recovery of capital recharge income offset by savings in void rent and debt charges. The final table on page 57 aims to set out the position in respect of COVID funding previously received and retained by the Council. Some of this funding is available for services with other amounts held centrally. In terms of education, they are utilising some of their local education-based recovery funding, and in communities and economy, this is also the case. And in wellbeing, the table shows the £3.6 million previously highlighted. In the column second from the right, you're seeing the £490,000 approved from the central pot to be put into the Ayrshire Roads Alliance to support the service and the parking income. Chair, I'm happy to stop here before I move on to alternative delivery models.
Okay, do we have any questions on the first part? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just looking at page 55, housing benefit and council tax benefit subsidy, and it looks like we are £500,000 in the red. Are we able to claim that back for the Scottish Government? What happens there, or do we write it off? What's their stance on that? What would happen?
Okay, I'll go to Joe with that.
Thank you, through you, Chair. As a council, we receive around, as Julie said, £9.5 million. It's our share of a total national quantum of £351 million for council tax reduction, or CTR as it's called. CTR is based on applications from households. So we are receiving many more applications than we have in the past. We continue to process those applications and make the payments and provide the benefit and support. We carry that hit, and it's quite a substantial hit, as you recognised. We are making overtures to Scottish Government. We will not be alone in this, but it's giving an insight into just what's happening in houses the length and breadth of East Ayrshire. We are seeing additional calls for support. In our Scottish Welfare Fund, we're seeing the same take place as well. And it coincides and aligns with the work that was approved at Cabinet around the cost of living, and that £3.1 million that was allocated between February and last week, with a recognition that we're going to have to come back to members once winter bites to maybe bring forward some of the things we don't yet know today, but we'll know more about in the winter, and with some more options around support that you can approve for us to provide. So in CTR, it's unusual that the variance is so high, but please be assured we're lobbying, but also be assured we don't stop when the money's gone, we just keep paying it.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Maben?
Two, if I'm allowed. Page 55, the COVID-19 money, just above the table, 11.36 million to fund these continuing costs from COVID reserves. Is there a deadline with these COVID reserves? Has that money got to be spent by a date? Would there be a clawback if we don't spend it? And also, sorry, page 53, key points governance. There's a favourable variance due to employee cost savings. Is that posts that haven't been filled, or do we plan to fill these posts? Are we still trying to recruit to these posts? Thank you.
It's Judy for that.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Maben. And to take the second point first, yes, that is posts that are currently vacant at this point in time. And the service is currently doing a service redesign and with a view to filling some of those posts going forward. In terms of the COVID income, this was money that was passed to councils the year before last, through 2021 and 21-22 to mitigate some of the costs of COVID. And there isn't a deadline in terms of spending it or giving the money back, but it's something that we have managed very closely to make sure that, as we've said earlier in the report, COVID is coming out of some services, but it's still very much alive in other services. So we just need to be very careful that we spend that money prudently over the next period of time.
Councillor Kenny.
Just in terms of education, I think there's 300,000 overspend. I wonder if Linda could just expand on the turnover in early years. I mean, is there anything specific to early years or specific to East Ayrshire Council? Could you able to put some numbers on it, and what's been done to address the issue?
Okay, Linda.
Through you, Chair, and thanks for that question, Councillor Canning. I think where we find ourselves with that particular spend is clearly, as you know, not being able to achieve the level of set turnover. The issue for us just now is that early years is still an expanding sector, so we're not seeing the number of people leaving the sector that perhaps normally would through, I don't like referring to natural cause, but as people move out of the service. So because we're still in growth, we're probably sort of wee bit more aspirational than maybe we should have been in terms of what the turnover might be. But I think because we are still building new ECCs and indeed expanding them. So I think it was really just an over aspiration in terms of the turnover itself. In terms of confidence of that moving forward, it will in future years. I don't think it will settle itself to be able to give a number to you today, but I think it really is just due to continued growth in early years, and indeed the keeping, if you like, of staff who were given to us through COVID recovery. So there's still a lot of that playing out in those figures as well, if that's of any use at all.
Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's obviously reassuring to know it's not from leaving, which is, yeah. Okay.
Councillor Stewart. Legacy hand, okay, no problem.
Legacy hands.
Any further questions on that first section? Okay, I'll move back to Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Starting on page 59, there's analysis of the financial position for the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and for the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. In respect of the Ayrshire Roads Alliance, the table shows that overall the position is a £399,000 favourable variance. There's an underspend within strategic delivery of around £300,000 relating to the centralised element of the service. This is mainly due to savings in salary costs, lower than expected insurance costs and an over-recovery of capital programme income. Within the local delivery element in East, the £490,000 adjustment for the contribution to the parking income is reflected. In local delivery at South Ayrshire Council, we note the additional expenditure on supplies and services and fuel price increases. On the capital side, we can see the capital expenditure plans for East and for South Ayrshire Council. We note the work on the Galston New Mill cycle path has been completed, and we also see at the top of page 60 that the work on the new Coming Up Flood Defence Scheme is slightly behind schedule. In addition, there are some funding challenges in this area as we go forward. In terms of the bus station, we note that there are some supply chain issues which are impacting on further phases of the work. And members will recall that the head of the Ayrshire Roads Alliance gave an update at Council last week around the bus station and some of the ongoing challenges being experienced and taken forward by the Council and other partners. We also note the ongoing work in respect of car parks, resurfacing and the LED replacement programme. In terms of the Leisure Trust, we see that the Trust is projecting to end the year with a balanced budget position. There's an anticipated shortfall in income, particularly within the sports development area, which continues to face some challenges as a result of the pandemic. The management team at the Trust continue to take action to redefine what public expectation and demand for leisure services, particularly gyms, looks like going forward. They will continue to monitor the position closely to ensure they end the year with a balanced budget. Chair, with your permission, I'll continue on to Treasury. Members, the information in the Council's borrowing and investment position is noted at page 62. At period 4, the Council has a debt portfolio of just over £400 million, with the majority of this debt being with the Public Works Loans Board. Investments of £26 million are also held, and these are placed with relevant counterparties in line with the Treasury Management Strategy. The average interest rate being received is just under 0.3%. Members will be aware that there's an underlying need to borrow, and the Chief Financial Officer continues to monitor the position with advice being received from the Council's Treasury Management advisors. It's anticipated that it will take some borrowing in the next week or so. Chair, I'm happy to stop here for any questions.
Are there any questions from members on the sections we've just heard? Councillor Richardson.
I mean, this might be a difficult question to answer, but the average interest rate of all external borrowing loans is currently 3.81%. How will, what shall we say, current market fluctuations affect the overall cost of that borrowing? Do we have any ideas just now?
So through you, Chair, I could be flippant and say if I did, then I'd be a millionaire. But there's certainly challenges in that market, and you know, we are looking to borrow. We are under borrowed, which means we've used our own reserves instead of borrowing, and it's now time to borrow. We are discussing with our Treasury advisors several times a day when we will go into the market. We have a trigger point when the rates hit that will go and we'll take the borrowing. We're very conscious of the Treasury position, not just in the interest rates you mentioned, but just the Treasury position overall, and the need to just almost pause for a bit. There is turmoil, but the projections that we have in terms of future borrowing rates through the entire lifetime of this council, believe it or not, are that rates will fall. So we are seeing a dramatic spike. We saw yesterday intervention from the Bank of England, which did produce the desired results in terms of government bonds and gilt rates, and that had a consequential impact on a reduction in POLB rates. They're not quite at a level there that will hit our trigger, and we'll wait to see what they are. But be assured, we are speaking to our Treasury advisors throughout the day in terms of where we are with our position.
Well, thanks for that answer, Joe. That's just amazing that the Bank of England or the UK central bank has to intervene to actually, you know, save an economy from actions taken by the Conservative and Unionist UK government. But there we go, that's where we're at. Unbelievable.
Okay. Right. I shall move to Simon Bale. Excellent.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and good morning, members. The capital programme's continuing to make good progress, and that's shown by the extent of the green indicators in the report. However, as I've previously noted, it faces significant challenges around about construction inflation and the supply of materials linked to a number of factors.
As usual, without going through the report in any great detail, I'll give you an update on a selection of projects in relation to their stage of development. Projects recently completed include the refurbishment and extension to Crosshouse Primary School and Communication Centre, which was handed over on the 30th of August, with the pupils returning on the 7th of September. The first phase of properties at Miller Shields and Drongan as part of the SHIP housing programme, and also the enabling works contract for Dunlop Early Childhood Centre, which is now completed and has allowed the new build project to commence on the 12th of September. Along with the project at Dunlop, there's approximately £45 million of construction contracts currently on site, including the restoration works at Dean Castle, where final snagging has just been completed, the new build Netherthird Primary School with internal works ongoing and pupils scheduled to return after the October break. And there's also a number of new build housing developments on site, including Witch Road in Kilmarnock, Bellevue Gardens in Kilmarnock and Quarry Now Auchinleck, where handover is expected next week. Projects at technical design stage include St Sophia's Ennerfit refurbishment, where a contract award's anticipated later in the year. The Galston office project, where building warrant and tender information started to be prepared. And final landscaping works at St Marnock Square, where tenders have recently been returned and are currently being assessed. Projects in the earlier stages of development include the Doon Valley Community Campus, which is now restarted at RIBA Stage 2, with concept designs being finalised. We have the Stuart Academy extension, where concept designs have been agreed and detailed designs are now being progressed. And we're also progressing projects linked to the Ayrshire growth deal, including the core project, with options being explored to rationalise design and reduce costs, and Moorfield Phase 3 and AMIC, the Ayrshire Manufacturing Investment Corridor, with designs currently being developed in conjunction with external consultants for both of these projects. So that's just a quick overview, Chair. So happy to take any questions on these or any other projects. Thanks.
Okay, have we got any questions, members? Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Chair. Just the wording around about St Sophia's Primary School, what do we mean by poor performance of the external design team?
Through you, Chair. Yes, the report identifies some challenges we're having with St Sophia's. We engaged with industry experts in terms of the Ennerfit project there, but that has faced some challenges around about the loss of key personnel from their Edinburgh office. We've escalated it within their organisation and we've put some mitigation measures in place and working closely with them to pull the project back on track.
Thanks very much. Just on Dunmelliton Early Learning Centre, I'm absolutely ecstatic to see that. I think Scottish Water's just put the pipes in yesterday. Are we still going to be online for opening October 14 when schools go back?
Again, through you, Chair, that's the expectation, Councillor. We have unlocked that issue, or the contractors unlocked that issue with Scottish Water in terms of the drainage connection and the water supply. And as you've noted, works are underway. So yeah, we hope to target that completion middle of October.
Thanks very much. And just if you can indulge me for my last one, Ayrshire Growth Deal, the core project. 24 million project on hold. What do we mean by a preferred contractor? I thought we were working alongside the university. And I suppose for me, a £24 million project, what if we don't get a preferred contractor? What happens with that? Do we still, do we shelf that project, or what happens there? And really, can somebody tell me what the core project is? Is it in line with Halo, or is it something completely different? Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. So the £24.5 million is funding related to a centre of excellence in Cumnock, the Community Renewable Energy Project, but it also relates to wider demonstrator projects, which the Centre of Excellence should support. So at the present time, a design is being developed in conjunction with University of Strathclyde for this Centre of Excellence, which will inform and support what these wider demonstrator projects around about the community will be. We have, again, hit a bit of a challenge at the moment in terms of the cost estimates for that project, and have therefore paused the design team rather than expending any more cost on consultants until we can look further at the detail in conjunction with the university around about what the technical aspects are going to be within this centre. So discussions are going on in tandem around about the demonstrator projects, which are really the ones that are going to be delivering the renewable energy solutions for Cumnock, and what those might be and how that might inform what changes we might make to value engineer the scope of the project at the Centre of Excellence in Cumnock. So the preferred contractor that's noted, there was an intention that what we would do is for the construction of the facility in Cumnock is engage with the marketplace to develop into what's called a pre-construction services agreement with a building contractor to build that project, and they would work with us to develop the design until we were at a position we were comfortable to award a contract. So again, until all the details are worked out about the what's actually going into the building with the university, it makes sense to pause that development with a building contractor until we're clear exactly just what the scope of the project will be.
And that will come back to council.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councillor Cogley.
Thank you. Simon, I wonder if we could just go back to St Sophia's and to the Galston office. My most recent recollection was that St Sophia's Primary School was being decanted as from half term. Are we still on target to do that, or have the works been deferred? And similarly with the Galston office, are we set to commence work, which I believe was due to start in January? Thank you.
Thanks, through you, Chair. To take your second question first, Councillor Cogley, Galston office project still on track. At the moment, we're preparing the building warrant application and tender documents. Current programme shows a starting site, as you say, early 2023. At St Sophia's, the intention is to decant the school into the former Kirkstyle Primary School. I would just need to check exactly what the dates would be for that, but we are looking at a contract award towards the end of this year with a start on site early next year. But as I mentioned before, we're trying to unlock some difficulties that we have with the design team at this stage. So I can take some soundings and gauge just when that actual move for the primary school would be, but it still is. We still are looking at a start on site early next year.
I shall go to Joe quickly.
And through you, Chair, and thank you for the point on Galston. Just for yourself and for Councillor Clark's benefit, Simon and I are due to go out to both the Community Council and to the Development Trust. I think it's in November, and you'll see from this report that that's to coincide with the building warrant. We've got planning application, the planning consent is in and received. We've got the building warrant just to take place, and we've now got the tender to go out. So we're about to hit the ground running, which is really exciting. And that's on the back of the email that Simon and I sent out just, I think it was last week.
Move to David Mitchell.
Provided the last one's finished, Chair, through you, I just needed to come in the previous conversation and pick up on the point that was left when members and Simon were addressing the core project. So as long as Councillor Cogley, if that point's finished, then it's just to point out we just need to manage expectations, because what Simon described there with the core project is effectively we are still at the stage of agreeing what the ingredients are for the recipe in terms of the design, in terms of what are in, what are out in relation to the demonstrators. And obviously there's a cost aspect to that. Once we've agreed the ingredients of the recipe, we will then proceed to tender to bring in, on a design and build approach, the preferred contractor who will be identified through that tender process. So we don't know who they are just now. They'll come in then and take the recipe, the ingredients, if you like, and cook up the recipe into a design. So that's the kind of process in the most simplified form. It was just, the point was that it was left on and that would come back to council. It was just to flag up that in terms of our own delegated arrangements, the two things that need to be in place for a contract to be awarded are, one, the approved budget, and two, that the proposal is to award to someone on the outcome of a proper tender process. If, and we've covered this before, if in terms of in terms of the delegated scheme and our current operational arrangements, if those two elements are in place, the actual contract post-tender and evaluation and award would be signed off by myself as the Chief Governor's Office on behalf of the Council. So the only requirement to bring core back to Cabinet or Council would be, one, if there is no ability to bring it in within the currently approved budget, so there was an ask for more money, and I'm not saying that's the case, but if that was the case, it would come back to Cabinet to reapprove additional expense or not, as Cabinet saw fit. But if the design that's proceeding to tender is within the currently approved budget for the core project, which was the overall 23 million referred to, then it wouldn't necessarily come back to Cabinet for a decision at any point, but obviously will continue to report progress on all the AGD projects as appropriate, whether in bespoke reports to Cabinet or in further iterations of East Ayrshire performs. So it was just that. I appreciate it was just one small point. It's not to be smart, but it wouldn't necessarily come back to Council unless there was a requirement for additional funding to be approved, and that would actually be at Cabinet. So it was just to give that clarity. Apologies for being pedantic, if that's how it seems.
Okay, members, are there any more questions on that section? Councillor Maiden.
Page 67, the one right at the top has got a wee red flag on it, waste and recycling depot. Total budget of 6.2 million, and I take it they've already spent 1 million. They're looking at it's currently on hold as a waste management team consider the implications of potential changes with other local waste and recycling providers. Who would these other providers be that we're not doing the project now?
I am conscious we're in open session. What I would say is, as members will be aware, A, services used to be provided by BAR at Garlaff. B, as a result of the tax case, BAR are coming out of that market. And C, at present, the facilities at Garlaff are available for acquisition. And the council's having to give consideration to what actually would be best fit. So the works at the Ayr Road depot are on hold because there may be another way of meeting our needs here that would avoid the need for those works if we took a different approach. And discussions are ongoing at the moment, and I could maybe pick it up with you outside if thereafter, given, as I say, we are in public session, and I wouldn't want to trip into anything and breach any confidentiality, but it's on hold because in essence we are looking at a potentially better way and an unexpected option that's presented itself as a result of these other events. So the ball's in the slates, as it were, because it may well be that we don't need to carry on or add in some of the extras at the Ayr Road depot that were previously under consideration, and that'll finalise the impact and what's required. So it's on hold until we can sort matters out in terms of what might be the future of Garlaff.
So possibly the 6.2 million budget might be less if we're finding a better way to do it. Maybe.
That must always be the case. That provision was there. There was requirements there anyway, so there will still need to be a finalised project at Ayr Road, but considerations had to be flexible in what else might need to go in there following the discontinuation of the bar operation. But we now have other potential options there that mean that we will be able to close off and finish on Ayr Road. But at the moment, as I say, we just need to explore those other options. But yes, I can't say definitively, but there may well be there will be savings if we go that alternative route in other forms, whether they're on the capital project. But we're currently paying £400,000 extra a year to bring the waste up from the south, and there would certainly be that cost avoidance if we could reposition arrangements within the south. So I would hope, certainly we would reduce the excess cost would have incurred as a result of the tax case. Let's put it that way.
And Mrs. Simon Bell.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to mention, David's was noting Ayr Road there. The Ayr Road depot is a project that's actually ongoing at the moment. It's in its third phase of refurbishment. It's the Capenacre site that was planned for waste and recycling that is on hold at the moment, pending the discussions that David's outlined.
I'm guessing there's also a net zero gain as well if we're not shipping waste and recycling the same distance. If we're doing it more locally, it's less emissions, it's greener, better for the environment, etc.
So the bottom line, the bottom line is the waste in the south stayed in the south, while Bar were the contractor. When Bar had to withdraw from the contract because of the implications of the tax case, we had to make alternative arrangements. And having done that, we didn't still have the option of dealing with the waste in the south. So the waste in the south has been coming up to the north since earlier this year when the tax case happened. And you're right, because it's X number of lorries coming that distance and inevitably and absolutely necessarily, but we are looking to minimise that by coming up and developing a solution in conjunction with Bar that mean we will revert to a position where the waste in the south has still been dealt with in the south and not coming up. So yeah, it'll be a large number of lorry vehicle movements at the moment that won't be required in the longer term once we are able to hopefully conclude matters.
Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a wee point on page 68, the Dean Castle restoration. I see the total project forecast 11.5 million. 11.5 million is a lot of money, but I'd just like to say it's probably some of the best £11.5 million that the East Ayrshire Council will ever spend. Having been up there recently, and as most elected members had the chance to do, go round and see all the restoration, I think I'd just like to say thanks to all the officers involved, all the contractors involved, because for years to come, that's going to be a brilliant attraction for Kilmarnock and East Ayrshire as a whole. And I'd just like to say, if this is watched by anybody watching this, get there and go and see the Dean Castle when it reopens spring next year. And hopefully, as a council, we can market it and bring more visitors to the area from all over Scotland, because it's just fabulous.
I would echo that. Any further questions, members? Councillor Maben.
Doing well today. I'm being a right pest, aren't I? Sorry. Which Road, Kilmarnock, the Council House Build Programme. Handovers will commence late October and be completed by December. I drive up and down past Which Road regularly, and I've got eyes on the progress of the building site there. It's going well. Most of the houses seem to be up now. I would, however, be quite surprised if we're handing over houses in the next 3 or 4 weeks. I think there's still a way to go. I don't know if someone can give me an update on that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Looking at the report, I think maybe events might have been updated a wee bit since this was originally drafted. I believe the first handovers are starting in December, but I can check into that and get a bit more detail for you.
Any further questions on this, members? No. Right. So I'll now move to. I will now move to Amanda Lowe for People.
Thanks, Chair, and morning, members. The People pages start on page 71 with the absence statistics. The first table at the top of page 71 shows that there was a work days lost per employee of an average of 3.18 for this period. The same period last year, there's a marginal increase of 0.7. The next table on that page shows the reasons for absence, with the top reason being personal stress of 4,151 days, which is significant, but just to put it into a wee bit more context for members, it is a period of 3 months, which is an average of 1,383 days. 69 employees, remembering that we've got over 6,500 employees. And that's not to minimise it, it is obviously still significant numbers, but just to put it into a wee bit context. We continue to work, my own service works very closely with senior managers for each of the services, and each case is individually reviewed right down to the Chief Exec reviewing them, the Deputy Chief Exec, Director of Health and Social Care, etc. We've got a significant number of supports in place, and David maybe pick up later, but the stress risk assessment that's currently in place is being reviewed this year to see where we can improve. The bottom tables show the absence broken into the categories that's within our policy. All short-term absences are higher than the same period last year, with 2 out of the 3 long-term absences being reduced from last year. Over the page, on page 72, in line with our support and attendance at work policy, show the number of the supports that's in place and the activity within these. Just to finish up in the absence, I would also, I mentioned at the last, that we have appointed a temporary HR officer with a project plan to look at sickness absence. She's doing basically a deep dive into the statistics, the policies, the trends, and we'll get a report back from that when it's concluded. Moving on to page 73, so halfway down starts the workforce plan and key performance areas. You'll notice the overall headcount's increased by 7, but that's that's a larger increase in permanent employees due to a reduction in temporary employees across the services. And over the page, you've got the full-time equivalents for the same period. The next is developing our young workforce. As members know, this is a key area for ourselves, and it shows a slight decrease, albeit it's a slight decrease from the period before. It's still an increase from last year, and I would anticipate by the next period this to have increased because there's been significant activity ongoing with our jobs and training and our recruitment. The vacancies are at the bottom of that page, and you can see that the number of vacancies advertised has increased by 60 in the period. Over the page shows the number of new starts to the council, a total of 133, and the number of leavers to the council, again, a total of 100. The next section, communication section, is a new section, and this was just to demonstrate and let members see the activity that's been going on within our communication team. And finally, on page 76 is some performance indicators for our OD team, showing the face experience, coaching, and some impact quotes and spaces for listening. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Members, are there any questions on people and culture? Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, I suppose it's just an observation. The 4,000 days lost, and I'm really glad to see that we're bringing somebody in to try and look at what's happening there. It's good that we as a council are recognising that there is a problem there and we need to try and fix it. And whether that be putting extra support in place for our staff that are off, that are coming back to work, or potentially maybe ready to go off. So no, I'm really glad to see that bit coming forward.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Okay, if we move to the next section, I will go to David Durham.
Thanks, Chair, and it's still morning, so good morning, members. If I could begin by drawing members to attention, to the top of page 78. The number of non-reportable incidents that have been reported to the Health and Safety section has decreased by 183 in comparison to the same period last year, where we've seen a very slight increase in the number of reportable incidents to HSE by 4. The increase for the reports to HSE is basically due to COVID infections, which in balance we think have occurred within the workplace. But if we remove those COVID infections there, when we do the comparator, the numbers of reportable incidents are fairly static to same periods. If we look at the reduction of 183 incidents, however, that are not covered under RIDDOR, that's mainly attributable to successful interventions with children displaying dysregulated behaviours in their educational establishments and in our children's houses. If I could give you an illustration of this, Chair, between 1st April and 21st June, there were 104 reported incidents of violence and aggression from our children's houses. Now, of those 104 incidents, 94% of those were attributable to dysregulated behaviours of just 2 young people. Successful interventions with those 2 young people resulted in those 104 incidents reducing to 19 incidents for the same period last year. So that shows you the impact that these incidents can have where we're dealing with maybe 1 or 2 dysregulated young people and how that impacts in the overall figures. Just picking up on what Amanda was saying earlier on in terms of the stress management standard, that is currently under review just now, Chair. And what we're looking at is anecdotally, we do small teams risk assessments for stress, and we do individual risk assessments for stress as well. But anecdotally, what we're hearing back is that people are quite turned off by the word stress being used. So what we're looking at is actually changing that to personal wellbeing and team wellbeing risk assessments to soften the edges on that word stress and hopefully encourage more people to actually involve themselves and get engaged in the risk assessment process, which benefits everybody, most of all the people themselves who are actually experiencing stress. If I could just move on back to the report, Chair, paragraphs 26 to 31 of the covering report outline the various positive health, safety and wellbeing indicators. But if I could just highlight a couple of things, Chair, the suicide prevention work that we're doing continues. Currently we've trained 249 people. And we've got training courses planned for December and October, which are both full. And we're well on course to train over 300 staff and members of the public in suicide first aid by the end of the year, which was our target. I think more soberingly, Chair, since we started, we're here to listen strategy, to actually intervene with crisis cases. We've had to carry out interventions on 127 occasions since December 2018. It's a sobering thought, Chair, but at the same time, I think it's a positive thing that we have that in place, and those people have been given assistance. Well, it's known in the covering report, Chair, the community defibrillator initiative. I wrote to elected members this morning on that. It's progressing well. Contractors have donated 21 defibrillators to this point and cabinets to go with those defibrillators. And if I put that into cash terms, Chair, that's over £30,000 worth of donations that contractors have made under community benefits to this initiative. Here and speak today. So far, I've distributed 11 to community groups, and there's another 5 be distributed shortly, and I have 5 which are lying in storage just now, just waiting on applications coming through. So we just urge elected members, if at all possible, any community groups that want to be involved, to put their applications in, or even call me directly, and I'd be happy to give you more information. I'm happy to take any questions on that, Chair.
Councillor Richardson.
Just on the defibrillator scheme, which I think is brilliant. I had a case in my ward, and it's just around the parameters of it, because the Northwest Amateur Boxing Club, which most people in Kilmarnock will know as probably the sort of centre of excellence for boxing in Kilmarnock, they were looking for a defib, but they actually wanted it to be inside, so that if one of the young boxers had an incident, quick response, etc. But part of the scheme is that the defib must be placed on the outside of a building, which didn't fit with what they were looking for. Is there any way that could be reviewed? Just because somewhere like that, a hub for sports excellence, to me that's a high risk, because we've seen recently, that you can have professional footballers at Premiership level, collapsing on the pitch just because they're pushing their bodies to the max. Boxing training is probably renowned within sports as one of the most rigorous types of training you can go through, and it just seems to me it's like one of these things where a few lines in a scheme, we can't do that because they're no willing to place it on the outside of the building. But then should we be thinking, but this is like a sort of, a higher risk environment? Is there any way that part of the scheme could be looked at? That's just a question.
Through the chair, thanks for the question, Councillor Richardson. There is scope within the way that I approve these applications when I receive them, that we can give defibrillators to community groups and clubs for internal use. However, the priority that I have within the application process is for community accessible defibrillators because it's open to all then. And because of the volume of applications that we're getting through, well, we're always encouraging more to come through because we can go back to contractors and get more equipment to cover those community groups. My priority is always looking at if you like, community use or community access. What I would also point out is I've also declined a couple of other applications from bowling clubs, stick in my mind. One bowling club made an application again to have the defibrillator internally. And if you look at the age demographic, as the risk of that gets higher, the older you get, the risk there is actually higher, ironically enough. But I declined that on the same basis that it wasn't going to be accessible to the community. So it is there, Councillor Richardson, through you, Chair, but ultimately I have to prioritise community access in the first instance.
Thank you, David. Councillor Canning.
I'm entirely sure it's in your domain, but we're talking about stress and stuff. Apologies for my ignorance, maybe as a new councillor, but do we do anything to help employees around debt management? You know, given that where we're headed in the short term. I don't know whether we can. I mean, it's a, you know, whether we can or. Sorry.
So, Your Chair, I'm very conscious that that's an option that spans a number of services, but you know, it sits within their financial inclusion team, which isn't just restricted to the people in residence within East Ayrshire, but also to our employees. But through cost of living and through that targeted approach that we saw at Cabinet, the Head of People and Culture is very active in seeking details within each service and from each head of service about any staff member who is experiencing stress, financial hardship or so, so that we can put processes in place to support them. And that's on top of the stuff that the comments that David made about those interventions from December. And when you, I don't want to stand on anyone's toes, but when you start scratching away some of those reasons, within those reasons and founded upon those reasons is around debt and debt management, and that's where we are, both in the partnership as Charles and Alex said earlier on, and the work that Amanda does and the work that we all do, and supported by David.
Yeah, I suppose as well as that, maybe some proactive rather than wait until they're coming in financial inclusion or coming, you know, with stress, whatever. I'm just a question. Thanks.
Mandy.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we are doing proactive work, and folk will have seen where Vive Up, our new engagement platform, the electronic platform. There's a full section on there in financial management. Just now, mostly it's not a national-led initiatives, but as we're working through the programme, we're putting in more local initiatives as well. And there's a number of things within the wellbeing framework that will be placed there for employees to see. There is other elements to it through Vive Up that we've still to look at, and Joe and myself are going to meet with the companies involved just to see what exactly is there. But we're continually looking to see how we can improve it. But there is a number of tools there. And in addition to that, within PAM Assist, which is our employee counselling, but we've got an app 24/7, 365 days. There's a full section on it there to help folk with it, manage their finances and support them.
That's great. Thanks. Yeah, I thought that would be the case, but just ask the question.
Councillor Maven.
Sorry, page 78, the non-reportable incidents. It's quite shocking. Violence and aggression, 255 incidents. And the table below seems to point to most of these being in schools or education establishments. Is this number going down compared to previous years? Have we got a grip of this? Because that's quite shocking.
Yes, through you, Chair. Those figures are down on last year as well. So using the two trends, with the dotted line being that previously and the bars being that where we are. the actual number of incidents is actually significantly down in terms of all of that. And again, colleagues, this is down to the work that's going on in inclusion. You know, like some young people have been in SL33, etc. And please understand as well, the definition of a violent and aggressive incident is actually quite wide. So they're not all pertaining per se to, you know, fighting, etc., or particular levels of violence. Those can be verbal abuse towards a member of staff or verbal abuse towards another pupil. So the definitions there are quite wide, but it's always on our minds. Indeed, with an inclusion seminar yesterday at Loudon Academy talking about these things. And also the other bit that we're quite pleased about is actually a lot of the young people, in particular, we're seeing quite big issues in terms of antisocial behaviour at the weekends, etc., that are well rehearsed in council. But I think in addition to that, we do have young people coming back from COVID quite dysregulated and clearly, you know, looking to schools and their own families to help them get more settled into the more natural routines. So a really good point, Councillor Mayben, but the numbers are significantly down on this time last year when the young people were just going back to school, and we hope to see that trend continue.
Members, any other further questions on these sections? No. Councillor Canning.
Just when you've seen the definition is very wide, is there any scope in future to look at creating, you know, bans or whatever in terms of trying to give them better information?
Through you, Chair, can I turn to David Doran for that one?
Again, through you, Chair, we could certainly look at splitting that information as it's presented between verbal aggression and physical aggression, if that would be helpful, Chair.
Yeah, I think that probably would be a good idea. Okay, any other questions on this section? No. Okay, I'll move to Julie again for the last few sections.
Thank you, Chair. The business briefings start on page 81 and contain a range of performance indicators and other information that services would like to draw to members' attention. In the first set, it's perhaps important to note the number of days to process a new benefits claim. Throughout the pandemic, this has been consistently good in terms of performance being well within target. It highlights the move from housing benefits and the introduction of universal credit, and in effect, East Ayrshire and across all councils, the only people who get housing benefit are those who are on traditional benefits and are pensioners. Everyone else is on universal credit, and the housing element of universal credit is paid direct by DWP. As people make a change to their claim, move house and so on, then the traditional benefit is replaced with universal credit. So over time, housing benefit continues to reduce. This is causing an increase in the time it's taken to get council tax reduction applications completed, because in the past, the council tax and housing benefits systems were aligned. And the same information from DWP was used to support both applications. The admin grant that the council is awarded to run housing benefit is also reduced as the housing benefit claims reduce. This is reflected in the Finance and ICT budget, where we're currently down £100,000 as DWP expect our staff to spend less time in housing benefit. However, as a result, they're spending more time in council tax reduction because of the different systems, and this will be reviewed as part of our service redesign. We can see that the householder planning applications are over target, and this includes a number of legacy applications, noting that there's been a substantial amount of work done by the service around this area. Members will note the paragraph around the Strategic Equity Fund, which essentially replaces the former Scottish Attainment Challenge. East Ayrshire was one of 9 authorities that were part of the former Attainment Challenge, and this has been changed with the funding redistributed across all 32 councils, and the reduction to those councils impacted, ourselves included, is to be phased through to 2026. As the paragraph notes, we will move from having £3.7 million down to £1.2 million, and this will be reported further in future reports. Colleagues in education are actively working to prepare for the reduction in funding and to ensure that critical elements of the SAC work can continue once all the distribution changes take place. The indicators for communities and economy are listed on page 83, and in terms of the temporary accommodation, we can see the range of multi-agency work being undertaken between colleagues in housing and communities, the third sector and partner organisations. On page 86, in wellbeing is testimony to the exceptional work of staff across the health and social care that the hospital discharge over 2 weeks indicator target of 0 continues to be met. The report provides information on the delayed discharge bed days indicator, which is over target. The paragraph notes the whole system pressures the service is experiencing, along with partnerships across Scotland. Work is ongoing to bring this down, including the use of resources such as the East Ayrshire Community Hospital. Chair, I'll just move on to the complaints section. The information on complaints begins on page 88 and shows that over the period covered by this report, 29 complaints were received and 10 were carried over from the first quarter of last year. The majority of these, a total of 27 complaints, were closed with a full response and 12 will carry forward into quarter 2. The analysis shows that 31% of stage 1 complaints were fully upheld, with 25% partially upheld. In line with our revised complaints policy, we not only record the complaints and their outcome, but we also note the improvement actions for services following specific complaints, and these are also listed in the report. Page 89 drills down into the type of complaint and whether they were withheld, along with the number of days to respond. Within the period, the time taken to conclude complaints at stage 2 was 5.2 days, which is an improvement in last year, and the time taken to conclude stage 2 complaints was 21.5 days compared to 17.9 days for the same period last year. This reflects the complexity of the complaints received post-pandemic, covering a number of factors that require a range of resources and responses that breach the 20 days. Chair, I'm happy to stop there for questions.
Members, do we have any questions on those two sections? Councillor Stewart.
Just on page 82 and the education outcomes for looked after pupils, I see that we've got more young people going into positive destinations, and I'm just wondering if that's the good work of the SL33, and hopefully for our area it will be SL66. Is that where the statistics are coming from that, please?
I'll move that to Linda.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Stewart. It's a really great figure for our looked after young people. And I think, again, it demonstrates the joined upness of our commitment to the promise as well. So it's clearly a big multi-agency push on ensuring that our looked after young people do as well as their other counterparts. But I think you're absolutely right. I think it's initiatives in the communities that are making a difference to these young people, like SL33, SL66, and who knows, there's maybe an SL99 in the ether. But I really do think it's the joined upness, and I think as well it's the amount of support that we see. I mean, the amount of members that can talk about SL33 as a currency is quite phenomenal. So I think it really does demonstrate that commitment we all have, you know, bound by the promise, if you like, to those young people that need our help the most.
Yeah, and I just think we've got to commend everybody for their hard work on that.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Cogley.
Yes, thank you. As far as complaints are concerned.
Councillor Cogley, Mike.
Sorry, do we have any statistics relating to the amount of time it takes to answer phone calls? Because the big thing that comes back to me at pretty much every community council meeting that I attend is I've got something that I need to raise with the council, but I can't get through on the phone line. Thank you.
I'll move to Joe.
Through your chair, we have a dedicated resource that sits alongside our telephone number of 550400 and triages those calls that come in. Where the calls are for specific elements or issues for a single service, for example, then we would triage that and pass it on. I'll have the stats on that, on calls, incoming calls to the council. We met as a CMT yesterday to discuss the draft digital strategy which we're bringing to council next month, and within that report we'll have details around telephony, wider telephony arrangements, and also about call handling and the like. I'm happy to give you the information that I have in terms of incoming calls to date, but there'll be far more information provided to all members in next month's council, Chair.
Thank you. If I could just come back at that. So if I could just come back on that. Thank you, Joe, and I look forward to receiving that information. I think the point I'm making is the access to the triage system itself and the length of time that it takes to get through to that.
In Through you, Chair, I'll take that back and maybe speak to you with this meeting, Councillor Cogley.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Anything further? Councillor Maben.
That's me again. Positive initial destinations, back to what we were talking about again with education. Are these tracked? Are these short-term or long-term? So, for example, a young person leaves and gets a college place. If they finish at college place 3 months or 6 months later, or they leave it because it doesn't suit them, do they then bounce back in to the system and we're looking after them again, or do we just write them off? You had your chance, you've written a positive destination, and now it's up to you. Go.
It's Linda.
No, through you, Chair. Another great question, Councillor Maben. You'll be delighted to know the answer to this as well. Absolutely don't write them off. So there's 2 measures taken for positive destinations. So one is an initial, and that's absolutely where that part is captured about the young person's initial destination, which might be college. They could be working with us in SL33. It could be a combination of lots of things. And then we follow that up with sustained positive destinations later on, which would give you another figure. But in between there's stories of young people. So clearly it's not just about the percentage that we see, but just to give you some reassurance. So in the second part, around about the catch-all, we track the young people through to 24 at this point in time. So it's quite a significant, as a participation measure upon us, which is 16 to 19, but through SL33 specifically, we work with young people all the way through to 24. So it really does mean that if we find out a young person has disengaged with their activity agreement or their college course, or they had a job and now they haven't, then the swoop in occurs and we bring them back to base, if you like, and that's why something like SL33 or SL66, as opposed to a school, is such a great way to actually engage with these young folks. So the great news is, provided that we keep up the contact with them, sometimes we've got to really go play trapdoors, but it's absolutely great in that we don't give up. You know, you've met colleagues like Marjorie Harvey, my colleagues in SDS, my colleagues in the partnership. So we find that really the reasons we're seeing results like that is we don't let MD slip through the net where we can.
Okay, members, any further questions on these 2 sections? Okay, so last but not least, I'm going to move back to Julie for the final section on this, which is risks.
Thank you, Chair. The risks start on page 91, and there are a few areas to bring to members' attention. Risk 1A picks up on the pay award and notes the gap of around £2.8 million in the current year, which has been worked on. CMT have been briefed and we're working together to try and bridge the gap, ideally on a recurring basis, which will be challenging given the timescales involved. This will be brought back to members in due course. In terms of risk 1B relating to the economic climate and the amount of income the council is able to collect, we note the earlier comments around the parking income. Risk 1C reflects the economic position in residents within East Ayrshire. We're noting the work led by the Deputy Chief Executive in response to the cost of living crisis. Members will be aware of the initial proposals approved by Cabinet and discussed at the Spotlight session last week. As we move forward, cost of living may require to become a separate risk in its own right, depending on the impact and the scale. Risk number 11 is a new risk in terms of industrial action, and this is specifically around the risk to council services. And as members will be aware, industrial action has been suspended as trade union members are balloted on the latest pay offer. Finally, to conclude the risks, and for noting, there are a couple of areas that have recently been removed from the corporate risk register. These are the former risk in equal pay, and in addition, the risk in open cast mines. These areas are still being monitored through the service-based risk registers, but are no longer included in the corporate register. Chair, that concludes the report, and the recommendations for members today is on page 45, and these are to note the contents of the report, and happy to take any further questions.
Members, have we got any questions on risks? No. Okay, so if we move to page 44, section 3, the recommendations. Are we happy as a committee to take the recommendations on East Ayrshire performance? Yep. Okay. Thank you for attending today's meeting.
Chair, sorry, I wondered, sorry to interrupt you. I just wondered if you'd indulge me. There's just a couple of points I wanted to make. General points arise now at the meeting today, and which members will hopefully find helpful and supportive. The first was just, joking apart, no members should make any apologies or feel the need to atone for asking questions here. The scrutiny function sits with the function of the committee is to scrutinise the information we put in front of you as officers, and therefore that is part and parcel of what we do here. So it is the business of the committee to make sure that members are happy with what we have here. So there's no right or wrong questions, and there's no quota of questions. It's a question of applying scrutiny in a reasonable, proportionate manner as you do. Just as well, the other point that came out was in terms of any training needs, there are arrangements in place for all members in terms of the elected member development programme, and there are opportunities throughout each year to identify future training needs that we can build into the programme. And there's also the recently introduced annual. You might remember the first GNS post the election, I think it was, we brought the output from the first annual self-assessment by your predecessors on the Governance and Scrutiny Committee as to how they felt they were performing and where there might be gaps and room for improvement. And in that regard, we'll be doing that again in April, and you'll have that chance. But equally, it's not just once a year opportunity. If at any point we identify, or members for themselves identify, there are things that we could usefully offer a bit more support and training on in particular areas, certainly a lot of the financial stuff, etc., then, we just need to identify that ask and see what we can do to put other elements in place to support members. Because the other point I was going to make in all of this is that in terms of the previous governance scrutiny membership prior to the recent election, I think the team, there's 11 members in this committee, and 10 of the players are new. There's only Councillor Cogley, I believe, who has continued on from the last GNS. And to be fair, there's only Councillor Cogley and Councillor Jones who served in the previous term, along with Councillor Stewart, who served in a earlier term than that. But that means of the makeup here, 8 of you are doing this for the first time. So to be absolutely fair, what I would say is, in Councillor Cogley, we have a view, there was a view taken at the self-assessment in April that there might be a bit of room for improvement within the scrutiny aspect by this committee. But and this is me saying this, and you can take it or leave it, but from where we're at already, I would certainly expect that won't be the case when we do next year's self-assessment in terms of the level of scrutiny that's been applied at this meeting by you, the members, since the election, and we set it up in this format. So it's more of the same is really the message, because it's absolutely important. You're not just doing this for yourselves, you're not doing it for you're doing it on behalf of the whole membership of the council, because this is where there is the opportunity, not for every bit of report and every piece of information, but where appropriate to do that deep dive, because it is the function of the committee for you to go away satisfied that what we're telling you is accurate, and that what we're doing is what we're expected to do in terms of delivering on policy and fulfilling our statutory obligations, etc., etc. So the more questions, the better. Colleagues will shoot me for that, but as you'll see from the smile on colleagues' face when they get one they like, it does work both ways. So it was just to make those points in terms of scrutiny is what you do here, and if there's more we can do in terms of support and training, then as we identify those needs, we're happy to put other measures in place to help you do your job here, because it isn't an easy one. That was all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that's extremely helpful. And I would agree with what you're saying there. Can I just move quickly to Councillor Cogley?
Yeah, as the voice of continuity, so if I'll just interject there, and just to say, I think this morning's meeting has been really, really good, and I think we've had some very, 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 very good debates. So I think it's great. Now, I know I was slightly late joining, and did we miss point 3 on the agenda? The school inspection updates. Did I miss that?
I think you did, Councillor Cogley, but the committee didn't, I'm afraid.
Right, okay.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Yes, I mean, today has certainly been a refresh for me, because it's been a while since I've chaired a council committee. So, yeah, it's been a really good meeting this afternoon. There you go. Right, okay. I will bring the meeting to a close at 12:26.